Welcome to number 78, the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, and with Brandon Flanagan, we're in Boynton Beach, Florida at the FM Tennis Performance Center. And today is Chinese New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Steve.
We could go through Chinese proverbs. It's also the day that Tom Brady retired.
Sad, sad day.
Love Tom Brady. I don't do too many adult clinics, but I'm teaching the overhead, and you cross over and you put the racket in what we call the quarterback position. I go, ladies, the guy who looks like me? I'm just a little taller. Tom Brady. No, I love Brady too. Love Belichick. I love football. I just think the American sport, it used to be baseball, but I think people would agree that football is number one.
Those of you watching on YouTube, I've got a New York Jets mug here. So there were about 20 years I hated Tom Brady, and then in 2 years I really liked him.
1969, Joe Namath, Baltimore Colts. All right, tonight we're going to interview Michael McLaughlin, Mackie D. We were going to interview him the previous week, but we had to skip a week. I had said that one of Vic Braden's dearest friends. And what we want to try to do with our podcast is just reinforce what our 8 pillars stood for. And of course, Vic Braden used to call him Uncle Vic because once you got to know him, it just seemed like he was your uncle. What a great guy. But that he is the cornerstone. He's the number one pillar. There's so much information and actually so misinterpreted. But it'd be great. You're asking me how many years I've known Mike. 43. 43 years. Seems like yesterday. But I'll call him up. Good Irish name, huh, Flanagan?
Keeping the Irish thing rolling here. 2 kinds of people, right, Steve?
Yeah, those who can use a cell phone and those who can't. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Mackie D, Mike McLaughlin, Brandon, and Steve. Looking forward to talking to you.
Hey, Mike.
Hey.
Great
Guys.
Great to have you on as a guest. I just introduced you as one of Vic's closest friends. And if there's anybody to reinforce what Vic Braden stood for, you'd be the guy. Top of the list. There's I would say, unfortunately, you and I are not spring chickens. There's not so many Bradenites around anymore.
Well, we're getting into that age group for sure. But I was proud to be Vic's friend. I was proud to call him a friend. And, I just, thinking back on it, I knew him most of my adult life. That was a real treat, and a real learning experience. I mean, that's what life's all about, right? Learning as we go. And boy, I got a good start on that back in the days of
Koda de Caza. Of course, when I say Bradenites, Brandon, there's few people that have learned so much indirectly through Vic. We're just saying that Brandon has what we would say the influence of Braden with his tennis game. So many people that we've taught over the years. When did you start at Koda? You were there when I got there. I first went there in '79 to go to the academy, the United States Tennis Academy.
Yeah, I was just looking over. '77 was when Vic's book came out. I was back east, working construction because the University of Maryland didn't ask me back, and teaching part-time for the park and planning, teaching tennis part-time. That's pretty much, I don't know if the state of tennis teaching has changed much in 40 years, but, my roommate, we played a lot of tennis, and he worked for the local Parks and Rec, and one day he said, "Hey, we need a tennis teacher for this kids class. You want to do it?" I said, "Sure." I didn't know what I was doing, but I enjoyed it, and took a course from some local guy that was, I was just trying to learn. But then Vic's book came out, and boom! I mean, it just blew me away. Here's a guy that knows what he's talking about, as doing the research. The photographs were just amazing, and and I took it out on court. It worked. The stuff worked. I took it out on court for myself, for my students, and then that in the back, if you recall, in the back of the book, there's a reference to. I think he actually mentions the tennis academy, and so I tracked it down and called up about it and found that they had an academy for coaches. So I think it was 78 or 77 or 78. Jackie, my girlfriend at the time, we were living together. Now my wife. We went out there for one of the academies. Steve might have been the same one, but no, I don't think so. If you went 79,
yeah, you were there before.
I was. Yeah.
You were
So
already
it was
on
one.
the
It was
staff.
one. Yeah, it was the one before that. And when I saw the place, oh man, it was just no contest. I knew as soon as we got there, and then heard Vic and saw what he was doing. I don't know whether we talked about it there or on the way back, but I pretty much made up my mind that I had to get out there. And so I think we stayed back here for the following year, and then made the decision. And Jackie was crazy enough to go along with it, and she was working for the Bell system, the telephone company, which was a monopoly at the time, cross country. So she was able to transfer to a job out west, and so we had that to help us make the decision. And we just packed up a van and headed west. No promises. Before that, we did make another trip out there where I sat and talked to Mary Lay, and I met with, I forget the Koda coach who was working in Southern California, who I just picked his brain about, getting on the staff there. And basically they have this, they had a process where you had to observe. You had to go there and just on your own time and observe, just go through all the drills and the sessions with the coaches as an observer, so you can learn the process. But at the same time, you were being observed for whether you would, fit in, that kind of thing. So after that was just a vacation. We went out there to check the possibility of working there, and that's when Mary said, "Well, first step is to get out of here. We can't make any promises that you get on, but we do hire all the time." So we made the move in '79. Headed west with whatever could fit into this panel van that we had. And I did have some friends. A guy I worked in construction with, his family lived in El Segundo or Redondo Beach. I forget, one of those up there that we stayed with when we first moved out there. And I started the observing process. And Jackie started working for the phone company. That was '79. And we probably met Steve at that '79 tennis academy, because I went to a few of them, both as a paid student of the academy, but also when I was working there.
I think one point that you brought up is the observing. It's a two-way process. It's a great way, really, not to hire by interviewing. Come on out and hang around us, and
right.
We'll observe you, and you observe us, and see if it's going to fit, see if it's going to work.
Good point.
Didn't you get the title as a professional observer, Steve, after you were there for so long?
When I went there, Vic called me observer's observer. I could actually imitate the coaches and go through the different styles, whether it was Greg Smith or Kim Spears, Rick Schroeder, Tom Fye. I mean, there was yourself, Batman. But no, I think, I went to the academy as a paid student twice. Then I worked there during the time that it was held. He had it was called the USTA. It was twice a year. And then it was in April, then it was in December, then it was only in December. And it was a packed house.
It was.
With But no,
Are you,
Vic called me observer's observer. What I did was I even turned the work down at one point, but then when they got busy, it was busier in the summer than it was during the school year. But actually, that was back in the day when kids were only in tennis camps in the summertime. It was just a resort clientele. It was pretty much booked the whole time, but in the summer it was more students. I remember Mary Lay, the head coach, telling me you have to work, because what I would do is I just was flattered to be Vic's gopher, So,
Yeah.
and then when he would,
Yeah.
then after I'd been there observing for a while, when he would leave town for a special project, I would go all over Southern Cal in my van and find a way to watch other people teach tennis, whether it was in San Diego, LA. But
yeah, well, he, I was sad to see when they stopped doing those academies, because those were just out of this world. And the people that they brought in, the information and the audience were teaching professionals. These were guys that some of them probably came in to challenge, and they did. They would challenge Vic, and Vic, he accepted it. He wanted people to challenge and ask questions and show the proof. So, and I don't know if you were there, Steve, when the shuttle astronauts presented.
no, I was. I was not there for that.
I forget what year it was, but I mean, what tennis outfit brings the astronauts from the space shuttle, which was flying at the time?
Wow.
To do a presentation on exercise in zero gravity, and it was part Gideon Ariel, who was Vic's partner in the Sports Research Center, had developed this pneumatic exercise machine that wasn't gravity dependent. So that's part of it was his connection to, because he was pitching that to NASA as a way to exercise in zero gravity. But to hear those guys speak and talk about the effects of weightlessness and how I forget what the time frame was, but the time and space equated to 2 months of bed rest, where the muscles start to atrophy. Just even though you're moving around up there, they had actual bone loss, because that 1 G of gravity that we all face, in our daily lives when we raise our arm or scratch our head or whatever, we're going against 1 G of gravity. It's not up there, so the muscles don't get the exercise, the bones don't get they needed the force. That's what they were also looking at with the Sports Research Center, was the force plate, not just the zero gravity, but they could measure the forces when your feet were hitting the ground, and the astronauts' feet weren't hitting the ground, because nothing was bringing their feet down to the ground. So they had to bungee. In fact, I think they're still doing it, believe it or not. Bungee cord themselves onto a treadmill so that their feet were forced down, because that shock, that pounding that we get when we walk and when we run, they weren't getting it up there. So the bones were actually, they were getting showing bone loss when they came back. So that kind of stuff just blew my mind. Here at a tennis place, that kind of research on the human body was fantastic.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Can you think of any other different presenters, or even just any of the presenters during these academy seminars?
Well, that was the first I heard of Jack Groppel, who then I realized, hey, this guy's on the same par as Vic as far as his research goes, because he was saying a lot of the same things, and they were reinforcing each other. Geez, I'd have to go back through my records to think of any others, but it was always a good. And Vic was the key guy, and as I said, it was the interaction and him taking on some of these guys that were challenging him on what it took to do the research, and so that was.
Yeah, I know. I say Vic's door was open to anyone and everyone. Such a giving person. I know we talked about how Vic was portrayed incorrectly in the movie
King Richard.
He actually we interviewed Jack Groppel. That was great. He spoke so highly of Vic. I remember, I tell people that Jack Groppel and I were both spoon-fed at the same time. Even though Jack has his PhD in biomechanics, I mean, I think he'd be the first one to tell you that Vic was a self-made biomechanist, even though he was a licensed psychologist. But his intellectual curiosity was just across the map. I was on several college campuses with Vic. One where I worked for 10 years, and when we walked across the campus, I said, well, he could teach in this department. He could teach in this department. George Wilson taught us a lot about AV, audio visual equipment. So I could have been just an old sequence analyzer. We're in the basement of the Tyler Junior College Library, and humble Vic goes, I think I could fix that. So, here he is in the AV room fixing a machine that we're going to use. But yeah, amazing individual.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I did remember the Caltech guys. Were you there when they presented their wind tunnel? Because I'm sure you've heard Vic talk about the wind tunnel study, right?
Yep.
Yeah, well, they at one of the academies, the Caltech guys presented on that. I can't recall as much as the what it was about as far as like with the astronauts. That really hooked me. But but he was. I mean, he was a scientist. He was an artist. He was a psychologist. He was a performer. I mean, he fit so many different categories. Cinematographer. It didn't. All his stuff was always good. I mean, Rex Miller found out about that. The guy that did the Citizen Ash, the Arthur Ashe movie that's coming out, that's got some of Vic's archive in there. That we pulled out when we were making the move. Rex was gathering footage for that. He was looking for pre-1968. At the time, the movie was going to focus solely on the year 1968 because of such a pivotal year for Arthur. It was such a crazy year for society with all the assassinations, and it was the first year of the open tennis. But as it turned out, Arthur was so much just like Vic. He was more than just one. They're so multi-dimensional, especially his humanitarian work after tennis that they focused on his whole life and calling it Citizen Ash. But
back to Brandon's question about visitors. There was always people. I think of Bill Jacobson, who's one of our pillars with CompuTennis being at the USTA, the United States Tennis Academy program he had. But Brandon worked for Dave Fish at Harvard. He's retired now, but he was at Harvard for 40 plus years. Brandon was his camp director. But I remember I was assigned to spend the first part of the day with Dave Fish when he came out to Koda de Caza to present what he thought at the time was a great idea. It was called the unit turn. So to set the swing through body rotation instead of just through an arm movement, racket back. Vic was so gracious, but he did tease the Harvard boys a little bit after they left. Of course, Fish, he doesn't look at it. He's just a couple years older than me, so we're all in our early 20s. But no, there was always people coming in and out.
Well, what I meant to say regarding the Arthur Ashe thing is Rex Miller got this footage that Vic had from Forest Hills, 1966, and that's what we pulled out. And Rex took it, and Linda Zimmerman had it transferred to digital, and then I didn't hear anything about it. And then Rex calls, like a couple months later, and he says, "Mike," he said, "I finally got around to looking at the footage from that '66 Forest Hills." And he says, "Man," I said, "I didn't realize what a good cinematographer Vic was." He says, "All his stuff is, exposure's right on the money. The focus is good. The framing, composition. The guy, whatever he did, he really, put his whole heart and soul into it and tried to make it as, top notch as he could." Why
don't you tell us a little bit about Linda Zimmerman's father? He was big buddies with Vic.
Oh yeah, John Zimmerman. Geez, you got if any of you guys don't know John Zimmerman, just pick up a Sports Illustrated from any time in the 20th century, and he's all over it. He was on the stage in the for the Beatles, 1964. Ed Sullivan first show of the Beatles, and he was the first guy to put a camera on a backboard, a basketball backboard. Just amazing. And that was another one of my treats, having worked out there, is when John came out to do a shoot or two at the tennis college, and watching him work was just amazing, because if the light wasn't right, he made it right. As a photographer, it's, and I consider my dad was a better than average photographer, and so I learned from him. I learned on his Leica, and so that's why I felt comfortable in the photo lab, printing the photos that we shot, and then also when Vic introduced me to 16 millimeter film, and editing in his film lab, his editing bay. It was just to watch John Zimmerman work was to watch a master at work, and it was just, it was a real lesson in how many Polaroids he went through. Remember, this is before digital. With film, you had to know what you're going to put on the film. So he went through tons of Polaroids, which was basically like previewing on a digital camera, but he would get it right with the Polaroids before he, shot the film. But yeah, his book, the book is full of most of John Zimmerman's photographs.
And they have a website, correct?
Yeah, jzarchive.org. Anyway, yeah, just Google John Zimmerman and just be amazed at the photos. I mean, from across the spectrum of life. I mean, not just sports, but entertainment, and just amazing photographer. And they lived up in was it Palos Verdes or somewhere up there, and became good friends with Vic and Melody, and so they spent a lot of time together. Yeah,
Melody's Vic's wife, widow. At the FM Tennis Performance Center, there's all sorts of cool tennis photos. One is Vic hitting the backhand where the racket's high-speed photography. That came from Zimmerman, correct?
Right. Those multiple shots, multiple exposures.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that was his way of showing what Vic was doing with high-speed 16 millimeter film. Zimmerman could do in one image. You can see the racket throughout the entire swing at every point along the swing. It was just really cool.
Vic used to tell us to take a regular piece of paper, just roll it up and look at it like it's a telescope, and so your eye wouldn't be distracted. Remember,
right. That's what he did with the.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that Vic would do things like, say, walk into a stadium, close your eyes, and then just open your eyes and say, look for red. Close your eyes, no. Open your eyes, look for blue. That when people are watching tennis, just to film the feet, just film the feet, nothing else. And Vic towards the end, the studio he had where he had the video equipment where, say, for example, so many kids, especially on a two-handed backhand, can't really, according to Vic, you can't get away with it on a one-handed backhand. I think Jose Luis Clerc, he used to do that a little bit. But it's so difficult to hit a one-hander with a racket that collapse below your wrist. But a two-handers, it's a safe bet that you film 100 kids, not to be doom and gloom, but 98 of them are going to have that racket collapsed. But Vic can just show just the wrist and just ask the mom and dad, the son, the daughter, they're watching video critique, go, do you think this is the right position for the wrist to be in? Does this look efficient? Does this look strong? But creative,
when you say
so creative as well.
Yeah, we say racket head collapse, Steve. What's that? What do you mean by that?
On the backhand side, where a kid will, they just drop the racket head below the wrist.
Oh, right.
And Vic would just show that one segment, so you don't see anything but just how the right wrist is collapsed, the right arm is bent.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, let me just show you where your contact point is, and the hand's right in front of the belly button. So you're not you're not distracted by looking at anything else but that one point that, to use a verb that he's trying to illustrate.
Yeah, isn't that goes back to, and he would tell the story of how he got into film was with the index cards and putting the hole in the index card and watching Don Budge. It allowed him to focus on primarily. It opened his eyes to how much Budge used his knees, used his legs in the shot, and so that he went from a hole in the index card to the film.
Yeah, he hitchhiked from Detroit to from Monroe, Michigan, to Detroit, and he was in the rafters filming Don Budge's backhand. And that's still one of the best ways that Vic used to call it the cherry picker. You look up and you just see the red light. It's amazing. Remember those films he just showed of like Vijay Armitage and Chrissy Everett and Con,
right?
Where the camera's shooting down.
And
all the years since I've departed working with Vic, I don't know anyone who films from that angle.
No, and that's a question you guys might be able to answer. I have heard, or either heard or read that with the new analysis software, they can shoot from, you shoot in 3D somehow from one camera angle, and then be able to view it from any camera, from any angle. In other words, there's no need to have a camera above anymore. Is that accurate?
Oh, I would guess that you can do that. I don't know of it being done in tennis, but I think the technology is there.
I haven't seen that. Steve's more of a techie than me, so he would know.
I'm more of a techie. People would say that, maybe not in comparison to Brandon, but in comparison to most tennis teachers,
That's true.
I think I'm a techie, but not so much with the telephone and such. But also coming back to like PlaySight, and I think PlaySight is a great tool, but it doesn't do grip. Right.
Is that the thing that Jim Klein has installed at his club?
No. With Jim has, it's for calling the lines, if I'm not mistaken. I should be able to.
No, he's got. He was telling me.
He may have a play site. I don't know.
Is that the thing where that they? He's got screens on both ends of the court. I want to get up there and see what it is. The way he described it, it's really cool because they can set up a game for kids where if they hit beyond the service line, or they might have it marked either the service line and then the 4 foot inside the baseline, and they get points where the ball lands immediately. So if they hit it past the service line, they get a point. If they get hit it within that 4 foot zone in front of the baseline, they get 2 points. So it encourages them to elevate the ball and hit it deeper, and it shows up on this screen opposite side, so they get the feedback immediately. Yeah, it doesn't focus on their technique; it focuses on the results. But as far as
you described that quite well. One of his members has put that together. Jim Klein, for our listeners, his name's come up before, but he was a student of ours at Tennis Tech, this 2-year program we had. And of course, any student of mine becomes a student of Braden. And Jim, as you know, and you were right there side by side, had so much to do with Vic being in the Hall of Fame. He knocked down a lot of doors in the beginning. But yeah, coming back to PlaySight, the machine is only as smart as its operator, and it's like, well, it can give you all this detailed information, but if the kid is, say for example, the grip determines the angular racket face determines the angular racket path. In some ways, with all that technology, though, I would tell people you're still better off with a skip rope. With and that's amazing. Now, Vic used to always say that the research and practice are so far removed. That the research that's done by so many people, does it really work its way up or down across the board to people that are out actually teaching tennis? Vic, in that article, May 10th, 1976, Sports Illustrated, Tennis is in the Stone Ages, and it really still is. In some ways, I think it's got worse.
Yeah, because now you got guys throwing technology around using it, but not being able to explain it. If I hear one guy, they just throw the word pronation around, and they may not even know what pronation is.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, we have a lot.
But
of
that was.
Sorry to interrupt. We have a lot of kids that are pronating, but they're pronating because they're forcing to do that. The toss is now way out in front, so they have to accelerate the racket head, and as Howard Cosell, the late broadcaster, used to say about a punch, you pronate on a punch too, but you have to accelerate forward for that forearm and the serve to turn out.
So you can explain that, Steve. Most of the people that are out there throwing the word pronation around just throw it out there because it's a SAT word,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But there's just so many thoughts running through about Vic, and where his genius was taking that scientific information and, like you said, Steve, getting rid of the line between practice and research. He was able to take the research and help people put it into practice because of his communication skills. He was such a great communicator, great teacher, and so much of it was around humor, and he knew that. He knew that his humor was a teaching tool. He described it as anxiety reduction. And if ever you had any question about people, being anxious at a tennis lesson, you just had to be there Saturday mornings or Monday mornings at the opening of a tennis college. When the first thing we did after they filled out their self-evaluation, took them down on court and had them hit a ball for the photo. You guys probably know the photos that Vic signed, and eventually he couldn't sign them all, but the 8x10 that we printed in the photo lab of the person hitting a ball. So here are these people, first thing that we have them do is hit a tennis ball in front of everyone else. We lined them up on that one court. So we had to get them through quickly so they get back in the classroom for the start of the lecture. So they would get 1, 2, 3 balls at the most. And then I tell you, these are, captains of industry, doctors, lawyers, entertainers. And even when they had warm-up pants on, but especially when it didn't have, when you could see their legs, you could see their knees shaking. As we're standing there either feeding the balls or person taking the picture, this is a person standing in front of their peers, and they're going to hit a tennis ball, and their knees are shaking. I mean, I'm not talking about just one or two. This is So Vic knew that. He knew the anxiety that was around learning a sport and how important it was to people's lives, and so he used humor to put people at ease, to help them learn better. And I don't know anybody else that has done that on the level he has.
Vic's wife, Melody, she's a professional photographer. To our listeners, you'd have your photo taken, and people would be leaning on their back foot, and the racket face would be open, and they'd be off balance. And it was a courtesy fee. They just hit one ball, one shot. And Vic, I think scriptology is a hobby, but I don't think it's a science. But at one time, I had a scriptologist, because back in the day, you would get handwritten notes from people, and I remember Peter Burwash, Nick Baltieri, Dennis Vandermeer, a few others, and Vic. But Vic, he's a guy, when he signed an autograph, he never scribbled his name. He would always ask someone what their name was, and he would write them a note, like, I'll see you next year at Wimbledon, Vic Braden. He was just such a class act, Vic.
Yeah, and his speaking of script, his handwriting was gorgeous. Of course, he comes from the generation that had penmanship as one of the classes, early in school.
Yeah.
He would take his time with all those photographs and write something funny, or of course the angle, the camera taking the picture right in front of the hitter, and the ball being in different positions. You tried to get the ball and the racket in the photograph, and the ball would be all over the place, sometimes at the top of their heads. And so Vic always had something funny, but it was never funny at the person's expense.
Mm-hmm.
It was always, genuine and nice.
Well, you touched upon Vic with his humor. His presentation was so powerful. He was like a professional comedian. So I think many times people couldn't get past that presentation and hear the information.
Right.
We talked about Vic in previous podcasts. I volunteered to show Go for a Winner, the 1975 one take on double strategy. He was mixed up. Go ahead.
Yeah, the chalk talk with the overhead projector.
Yeah, I remember how Vic used to use
classic.
He would have the roll with he would just crank the plastic roll over the court, and every 2 seconds he'd have a clean screen, number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so over the course of a weekend I had to watch that tape 10, 12 times, and that's where the light bulb went off. I didn't get it, just like I would say so many people, but just over and over again, the knowledge base. To this day, it's like a myth all the way to the Grand Slams where the macho male ego, they put the woman in the deuce court. So if it's two right-handed players, the player in the deuce court always hits more balls just based on where the point starts. And, Vic used to say, well, the kid plays baseball, it's either picking dandelions or picking his nose. They put him in right field because not many balls go to right field. And how people run around, the righties are running around their backhand, pulling their forehand across their body to the deuce court. And then, 85% of players are right-handed and they're mistaught the volley on the forehand side with an elbow in and a continental grip. And so many balls go to the deuce court. But it's frustrating. I think all these years later, people listen to us and I think that they do think it's what I would say is hero worship. When Vic passed away, so many people were being so gracious because he was, even if you didn't really know the nuts and bolts, you just knew that Vic was a first-class guy. But you could talk to somebody for just a couple seconds or two and say, yeah, I really knew the Vic Braden method. And, of course, you could just you just talk to them a little bit, they didn't know it. Of course, then that goes even deeper, that Vic would say there's no such thing as a Vic Braden method. It's just Galileo and Newton were here a long time before us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Vic did not particularly take a liking to the idea of a Vic Braden method. Yeah, that the science spoke for itself, and what he was keen on was getting that information to each individual student. That's where he was way ahead of his time because he always stressed to us to find out as quickly as we could how the person learns best. And just flat out ask them, are you a visual learner? Can I demonstrate for you? Are you a kinesthetic learner? Can I take your hand and move you through the stroke? Are you an imitator? Myself personally, I played some of my best tennis after watching tennis on TV, because I would go out there and try to imitate what I saw. So he was preaching differentiation of instruction, years before it's not mainstream enough. I have an adult daughter now, so with Down syndrome, so I was in the thick of the special education universe for her entire schooling. And that's one of the things that needs to improve. We actually had a bill passed in Maryland in 2010 to create to have universal design for learning in the Maryland state curriculum. And universal design for learning is just simply allowing flexibility in how the information is presented and how the information is received by the student. It's like differentiation of instruction, but it goes beyond that. It says that the information should be available in visual, audio, and print terms in whatever the class is, whatever the information is. And that's a bell Vic was ringing decades ago. Trying to get us to individualize the instruction, make it student centric, not curriculum centric. And he was. I don't know if I ever got to tell him that. I think I did because he was. He knew about the struggles we had with Aaron in school, and I reflect back on those days when he was, leading the charge for differentiated instruction, and someday it'll be more individualized in the classrooms like it was at the tennis college.
Oh, Vic did so many projects. I remember how excited he was to be teaching the blind. Brandon, go ahead.
Yeah, I just I had the privilege to meet Vic once. We were talking about this before we got on air, but I know that one of the clubs in Tampa that Steve was a part of for many years, Vic came and did a weekend seminar. So in comparison to Andy Fitzell, who helped Steve start the GreatBase Tennis podcast, my personal experience with Vic isn't as extensive, but I felt like through watching his videos and reading the books, I, of course, got to know what he was like on camera and all the research and education he put forth for the sport of tennis. But it just sounds like it was so much more about education than ego. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges tennis has. And just going back to, we had a podcast with Chuck Creasy talking about the message versus the messenger in tennis. And I think we all want the sport of tennis to continue to thrive. I think COVID, in many respects, has helped more people get a tennis racket in their hands, but just to have more tennis coaches focused on education and not ego. And I just relate that back again to how you were talking about the USTA seminars, the United States Tennis Academy, not United States Tennis Association, but how there was such a diversity of presenters, just to show the versus, I think probably a lot of seminars are, you might get a talking head who has a big name because of what players they've coached, as Steve would say, for an elevator ride. And so I'm just, it's great just to listen to you talk about all that. And I think, of course, the listeners are going to really enjoy that as well. But that so far is something I would like to come back to. I know you even mentioned the state of tennis teaching and has it changed since you first got your start in tennis coaching. And unfortunately, I don't think it's changed a lot for the better. Even myself and my business partner were able to meet through a story of circumstance where he walked into the tennis center where we first started coaching at, based on the fact he saw a little kid's class being run by someone who was grossly incompetent, and he knew that he could do much better. So I know a lot of random thoughts there, but that's kind of where my thought process is going.
Yeah, I haven't been actively in the tennis trenches for a couple decades now. I still do a Sunday morning thing with my other adult daughter, who herself is a teacher, and a couple of her friends, that we, just a Sunday morning workout where we reinforce all of the tennis college things. And it sounds like a court at Koda, Steve. I mean, if you hear our Sunday morning things, and I have a ball machine, I have a tennis tutor ball machine. I get that up, so they do hit the required 900 balls an hour or whatever, we can fit in. But, yeah. And I hear the coaches, on the, some of them, I guess, are getting paid, that come out there and teach. And I had to tell this one to Tommy Warfel because it was just so bad. The guy, he's working with, like, the kid must be 8 or 9 years old. And, I had to refrain from just walking over there and just, talking to the guy, because the kid's not doing anything. And the guy's getting more and more frustrated. And finally he just yells out, "Just focus on doing everything right." He's yelling this at a 9-year-old kid, and, he realized at the time that he did, because then he walked up to the net, he brought the kid in and they talked. But, how I should have, now thinking back on it, I should have walked up to the guy but what do? I tell him to read Vic's book. I do that all the time anyway.
Tommy Warfel, for our listeners, he was on the Vic Braden tennis staff when Mike and I were. What a great guy. Remember his bio? He had a win over Jimmy Connors in the 12s. He played at Ball State. I remember, and I think that's very important, to watch people teach tennis. But Tommy would always ask, what are you having a problem with? The forehand. And he's, okay, where are you missing? Why do you think you're missing? He was always very good at entering the student's world, trying to probe a little bit and find out what was really going on, why people are missing. Vic, actually, there's so many things. When I used to train tennis teachers formerly, where it was an academic degree at the end of the study, we used to watch Vic teach without the volume. He was so animated. He was so good at just demonstrating. And then we would listen to Vic, and we would, the old TVs, you just darken the picture where you couldn't see him, you could just hear him. And Vic used the word no all the time. No.
Yeah.
But the way he would say it, nobody would think he was being negative. Mm-hmm. And what Vic would do at tennis teaching conferences, I used to tell him, Vic, just ask people to come on out and hit a few balls. Does anybody want to improve their forehand, their backhand, their serve? Because his genius, he made him look like a magician. But he'd get somebody hitting the ball better, but he wouldn't just say, okay, that's it. So, he was a showman because he was just such a natural-born comedian. I don't think he had to work at being a showman. There was nothing pretentious about Vic, but he would just keep taking it further. That's better, but.
Right.
And,
that's the real challenge in being a good teacher, is to reinforce with positive reinforcement, but redirect when they're going in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I think Brian Teacher was a great tennis player. I'm going to guess that he won the Australian Open, or he was in the finals. Of course, that was when not all the marquee players went, but in the 60s, Vic worked with everybody in Southern California. Of course, it was just private lessons, but the story is that Brian wanted to change his backhand, but not his forehand, so Vic had him sign a release. I took lessons from Vic Braden, but not on the forehand. And you could just see Vic pulling that off because the kid would leave a smile on his face. I remember Ryler DeHart, who became a very good player. Brandon trained with him, and we had to help him out. We raised some money to take him to work with Vic Braden, and Vic was telling him not to let the left arm fly open. And Vic would like to have people, especially like Federer, when they're hitting down the middle and they're warming up, just go 2-1-2. Turn with two hands on the racket, hit with one, finish with two. And of course, Vic, being a psychologist, Ryler said, I really don't like that. I'd rather do it this way. And Vic said, okay, you could do it that way. Of course, after the session, I had Ryler in a back room just grilling him. You're not going to do what this guy, you're not going to not do what this guy's telling you to do.
Yeah.
That's that whole thing, knowing you're looking a gift horse in the mouth.
And
in his own right, is with his hard work and his mother's hard work, he became a very good player. But it'd be interesting to just speculate with some of these players that we've worked with. Like, he became number one in the NCAAs. Where would a Ryler DeHart be without Vic Braden information? Or where would I have been without Vic Braden information? I used to call Vic all the time. I'd have a kid win a gold ball, or they'd win a college title, and would call Vic up and tell him thank you, because there's no way the kid would have that success if it wasn't the connection that I had with Vic.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
You guys, Steve, you stayed in to your credit, you stayed in the trenches, and because I was an East Coaster, I always felt that Vic should expand, and that's why I, volunteered for the overseas duty when he started opening up places in Germany, because I always envisioned a full Vic Braden Tennis College, just a cookie cutter like Koda on the East Coast somewhere. It would have to be indoors, of course, but it was such an efficient place, just the way things, the classroom, the video courts, the teaching lanes, and the running courts. Those four rotations that people should be running through them now. I mean, it's a very effective way to get people to learn and get the repetition that they need. But when I came back here, or when we moved back for family reasons, there's no Vic Braden Tennis College here. I had never, even when I was back here, before I went out to Koda, I had never had the desire to be a club pro. And then when I landed in Koda and saw what Vic had there, I said, yeah, this is it. The educational approach, the scientific approach, the facility, the machines, the emphasis on machines and heavy repetition. That's what really hooked me.
Can you talk another part of what Vic, I suppose he invented it or popularized it for sure, but the hitting lanes and the teaching lanes, something that I tried to get a little information off of the Google machine. But could you talk a little bit more about that setup?
Yeah, I love talking about that because Vic never completed the patent for it, but I helped him as we planned some more expansion things after I came back here, and he was dabbling with, we put some lanes in at down in Florida. What was that, Star Island, Steve? I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Many times there.
Yeah. When I was out still out in California, we put in some lanes down in La Costa, just standalone lanes. I always felt that the lanes could do, if clubs would, but it's a major construction thing because there's, you got the sunken pit to gather the balls and then machines to convey the balls. But I helped Vic. I found an attorney and we did the drawings and did the language and got Vic's a patent for it, and that and the ball machine.
Yeah, they were the old baseball pitching machines.
Right, jugs. But the patent that he originally has, and you can look it up. There's a patent that he got himself, which I still think is the better version. Because what was always the problem, Steve, with the jugs machines out on the serve, and it was still the only machine that could throw an 80-mile-an-hour serve, so people could practice their serve return. But remember the big on Vic's teaching court, those big serve. I mean the big jugs machine. Yep. Yeah. What was the biggest hang up with those? What was the problem with using those? Why weren't they efficient?
Well, I mean, I remember Kim Spears. He worked there for so long. He could play around with those machines and have it serve left-handed and right-handed. And
yeah, but what was their biggest bugaboo? What was the biggest glitch in those machines? Do you remember?
I would say that they were too sophisticated as far as just getting. For me, I would guess that it was slowing them down.
Well, it was similar to what they had. The same problem was in the lanes, but in the lanes, they always had Rafael or Juan. They always had someone up there monitoring the feeding. The biggest hang up was gravity. Gravity. They depended on gravity. They had a chain mechanism that would convey the balls with a finger that would carry the ball up and then drop it into a tube, and the tube would drop down and feed the spinning wheels, the jugs machines. Well, the tube depended on gravity, and unfortunately, too often the ball got hung up either in the tube or as it left the tube, because the machines still had to be tilted up slightly, depending on the serve. The ball was entering the wheels at a slight upward angle, and they would get hung up. So Vic had a patent early in his career of a positive feed instead of. And what he invented it for was, remember the holes in the court, Steve? The collected, yeah. Another genius thing. I mean, why? He'd had holes installed in the court with baskets in there, so you could pick the ball. You would just roll the balls in the baskets and pick the baskets up to load the machines. But what Vic intended originally to do was, instead of a basket in there would be a machine that pushed balls up into a tube. And it was a plunger mechanism that worked on like a camshaft, and it pushed a ball up into a tube and then as many balls as was necessary. And he had invented this thing in order to feed the ball machine, so that it wouldn't have to be gravity dependent. It would just push it right into the wheels. He never completed that, but he did get a patent for that initial ball lifting system to lift the balls out of those ball pits. And one of you bright geniuses should still do that. It is a great mechanism because it doesn't depend on gravity. It forces the ball into between the wheels, and you'll never have a hang up. So that's my contribution to your tennis programs.
Well, I know you weren't talking to Steve when you said bright geniuses, so I guess you're talking to me.
Well, any of the listeners out there, for whoever's going to hear this, the patent is long expired, so it's not that Vic has any claim to it anymore. But it's still, to me, if anybody gets around to doing ball machines, especially the type that Vic was talking about, where you never have to pick a ball up again, it's delivered from the court to the ball machine. That would be the system to do it.
Well, one thing with the listeners is that 43 years I've been talking to Mike McLaughlin a long time, and we're not supposed to use profanity on our podcast, but SIB and DIB. I'm the DIB, the dumb Irish bastard, and McLaughlin's the smart Irish bastard.
Well, we switch that title back and forth depending on how we feel during the day.
With Time Magazine called Vic's tennis college the best tennis facility in creation. But to come back to what you said is, so you use the big sweepers, they're on wheels, you'd roll all the balls into the corner. There's a basket built into the ground. But Vic had those baskets that you didn't have to bend as a tennis pro. They were the ball was right at chest level, and you'd use what we've called the Braden feed or the rapid fire feed. And I mean, over the years, feeding that way, where you just put the racket in front of it and you tap, it's the best way to feed the ball really fast.
Absolutely.
But Vic used to just feather the ball when it would stay so low. I remember Welby Van Horn was like that, where Vic, when you're trying to teach someone how to get below the ball, just nice and slow, just put it right in their strike zone. But I've had many teaching pros go, "Oh, you're not supposed to look like that. You're supposed to look like a pro when you're feeding."
Right. Yeah.
But he was always trying to make things better. That's for sure.
Yeah. And one thing I learned from him, and I use a lot, is how often Vic's on the same side of the court, feeding on the same side of the court as the hitter. He's got his butt up against the net. He's got the basket right there. And like you said, he's feathering the ball to the person. And he's not on the other side of the court, 79 feet away. There's a 78 feet away, hitting the ball. He's right there, so he can get to the person and take him through it and talk to him closely. And then, so.
Yeah, he would say the net's a barrier and put yourself on the same side. All the students that went to Germany to work for Vic, there was a boom back with Graf and Becker in the 80s. And it was a really interesting environment where the coaches were learning German as the Germans were learning tennis. It really made for a really,
I was one of them. Yeah. I just used that in one of my notes to Mike Valentine. One of my favorite German tennis words was Gegenüberliegenzeiten. That Gegenüberliegenzeiten was one of those German words that is a single word, but it takes a whole phrase, and all it means is on the other side of your body. Because on the serve, you were trying to get people to finish with the tossing arm, in front of them, across their body, stopping the shoulders from turning, and the racket arm finishing Gegenüberliegenzeiten on the other side of their body.
It's amazing how Niche Zoner and Zo helped out. Not this, rather this. Hey, before I forget, I had you send this to me just a few days back. What did Kim Spears say? What's the great Kim Spears line?
Were we going to go there?
Earthly,
are we going to?
Earthly and heavenly. No. You don't have to address it to anyone. I later can say that about Flanagan, but go ahead.
No, it can be applied in a lot of situations, but I think it's most evenly or accurately applied to these the television preachers. They're so heavenly minded, they do no earthly good.
They're so heavenly minded, they do no earthly good.
That was Kim Spear.
Right.
And that's, that was another special thing about the place, and it's not it's not only the man, but it's the place that he created and the people that he drew there. People like myself and Steve and I don't know if you guys know that we had a Navy fighter pilot that was there. We had a Catholic priest that was a coach. We had I know at least one PhD, Mike Valentine, was and still is PhD, and he's still heavily involved in Vic. He's still teaching.
Yeah, he's working on a project on teaching the serve, correct?
Yeah, and I'm helping him with that, to try to get that long text that he wrote to be more, approachable and more universal design. But yeah, no. And
Go ahead.
David Kramer, the Jack Kramer's son was,
Yeah, I just wrote that down. Ted Schroeder, Rick Schroeder was working there. So Ted Schroeder won Wimbledon the first time he played it. Jack Kramer, everybody in tennis at that time, was using a Jack Kramer racket. Also, Les Stoffen, his son was a part-time substitute coach, and he's the one who had the best serve. I think it was in the 30s, and the sculptor. It's just interesting tennis history where the sculptor goes, no, I don't like that. And the trophy look, it's amazing how many people are telling kids, you don't have the trophy look. You don't have the trophy look. The old chain puller syndrome where you're pulling the chain on the bus to tell the bus driver you want to get off.
Just a very quick story about the trophy look. I started a petition on change.org to change the common tennis trophy. And one of the comments was, it just was a bit of fun, bit of tennis education, but one of the comments was, what are you doing wasting your time with this? It's kind of like, well, you might be missing the point, but it's just another funny story about technique and just all the common misconceptions. I'm sure you could talk about all those as well, but just, another.
Vic spent so much time around the pros. Of course, he promoted Kramer's tour, but then also he did TV. It'd be so interesting. He would come back and, it was just. I would say that Vic was so misinterpreted. We say there should be a book written. Vic is missed, and Vic was missed. And I just don't understand where all this fact-based instruction, like say our governing body of tennis, they're still trying to iron out a certification program. And I was always flattered that Vic said that, that Vic and I should have worked together. And I said, yeah, Vic, thanks. You go forward with a flashlight, finding new things, making discoveries, and I'll go back with a club and hit people over the head. Did you get that? The tennis court is a rectangle. Water does run downhill, not uphill.
Yeah.
I think that's where I mentioned earlier that education versus ego. I just think there's so much ego in tennis.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Vic didn't have that. He had that ability and confidence to step in front of a crowd and lay himself out there. I don't know if that's ego or just confidence, to be able to perform, to try the jokes that he thought were funny, most often, they were, but maybe some people, like the guy about the move.org thing, that guy obviously didn't get it. But no, it's that was his genius, the way he was able to get that information across. And there's something else I want to share, is that this was brought to my attention. I never thought about it, but one evening, Saturdays and Tuesdays, I think, was the beer night, where, after the session, we provided some cold ones for the students, and they would hang around and have a beer or two on the deck. And we're sitting, me and a couple of three, I don't know if you were Steve, we were there that day, Steve, but a couple other coaches are sitting having a beer with this one student. It was a real nice guy. Some of the students you got closer to, got to know better. Others, they just, kept their distance. But that was another benefit of working there, is some of the really incredible people that you met. But this guy was a salesman for IBM. And he started this explanation of how what we are doing is a tougher job than he has as a salesman. And it really opened my eyes because a lot of what we were doing, Vic got the information across, Vic got them wound up and laughing and reduce the anxiety and all that. Then he turned them loose to us on the court to convince them. And we had to convince them to try these things. And that's what a lot of it was just convincing people to try something different, try something new. And Vic said it right in the classrooms that, the fear of change is a very powerful thing, and very a disincentive to learning. So we're out there, trying to convince these people. And that's what this IBM salesman guy was saying. You guys are basically selling what Vic's putting out there, and it's up to you to do it. And he says it's tougher than my job. And this is the way he put it. He says, because as an IBM salesman in my job, I do maybe 15% of my job is face-to-face with the customer. 85% is back, follow up, paperwork, that kind of thing. He says, you guys are out there 80, 90% face-to-face with these people, trying to sell them on this, on this technique, on this information. And that really struck me then, and it still strikes me now that's what good teachers are. They're part of it is especially teachers of body movements. When you're trying to get somebody to be aware of their body, what they're doing, and with the racket and the ball, and a lot of it is a sales job to get somebody just to try something different. So that stuck with me even to today.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I know that Steve mentioned earlier, through Steve's connection, providing the curriculum for the tennis camp at Harvard for many years. I was privileged to be the director of the camp one year, and we had a staff of approximately 30, college-aged individuals who played college tennis, different levels. Maybe they didn't play college tennis, but certainly all young and opinionated. And during one of our talks prior to going onto the court, coaching kind of 150, 200 screaming kids, I was illustrating how to teach a more efficient forehand or backhand or whatever it was. And I said, this is how you're going to do it, showing them an example of working with a player one-on-one. So we have kind of 10 kids in our group. How are we supposed to do this? And I then explained to them, well, you can do it this way, but at the same time, you have to get the kids to buy in. And it's more of a sales type job. Like you said, you should be able to convince the kids that if they stand on their head for 20 minutes, it's going to make their tennis better. But there's definitely a sales element to teaching tennis. But I wanted to come back to, we just touched briefly on the professional players that were around Vic's tennis college. I know that it wasn't maybe Vic's primary motive to work with the professional players, but I know that you had quite a few stories of the players that he did spend a lot of time with. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, Steve probably has more that than me, but the one story that still sticks with me today was, and Steve was there at the time, was when Tim Gullickson came. And it's not that he came only for Vic. He was coach shopping. He had been to Lansdorp and probably went on to other coaches, but he wanted to see what Vic could do. I guess he was in a slump, and he was looking for any kind of help, and he wanted to see what help Vic could provide him. And Vic jumped all over it. He got the cameras out and filmed them from all different directions. I don't know if we had the cherry picker then, but filmed his forehand, backhand, serve, and being close to LA, he could get the film processed right away. He could expedite it, and so it would involve running up to to the lab. But I'll never forget, it was Christmas Eve, maybe 81 or what year was it, Steve? Did you say it was 81?
Yeah.
When we were talking about it the other day. Yeah. Christmas Eve, and the film was going to be delivered that evening, and Vic was going to go over it with Gullickson. So I told Jackie I got to be there for that. So I drove back up to Kodo and sat in the classroom with Vic, and here's this working tennis pro. I don't know what rank he was at the time, Steve, but I was still a relatively new coach at the tennis college, and I knew what we were telling John and Jane Doe out on the tennis court, about how to hit a tennis ball. But here I am with Vic and a playing professional, and now I'm going to hear the real sauce, with the real secrets that Vic has been holding back. And so, put the film up on the sequence analyzer. I think Batman was there too, Steve, Bob Batman.
Great basketball player, Bob Batman.
Yeah, he was great b-ball player. So Vic starts going through Tim's backhand, I think it was, and damn if it's not the same stuff. Shorten the swing, get the racket lower, knuckles down. I mean, the exact same stuff that he's telling these people, in the opening lectures. Here he is telling a guy to, as a way to get to Wimbledon. So, it was famous by Friday was funny, but there was truth in it. That was the beauty of his humor. There's truth in it. And then when the next day, when Steve's hitting balls with Gullickson and Vic's working with him on the court, just to see it in action on the court too, and the real kicker there was, we're talking about sales jobs. Here's a guy this is his bread and butter. He has to make changes to improve. Man, it was just a real treat to see somebody that knows that is that connected with his body and his racket that can make a change like that immediately. When Vic asked him to do something, boom, he did it. No twist in his arm, no sales job there. He just, he was able to do it, and he saw it. I mean, he saw the improvement, he saw the difference, and that was that sealed the deal for me. That Vic was the real deal, and that's why I still, even though he's gone,
That was late. Tim and Tom, twins from Wisconsin, in their career, they were in the finals playing. They were in the Wimbledon finals. Their story is amazing. They grew up playing 3 sports, and tennis wasn't really one of them in one sense. They played football in the fall, basketball, baseball, but they grew up across the street from tennis courts. And they both went to Northern Illinois. And then Tom and Tim, they finished. They were there all 4 years. Tim had an idea that he was a lot better than he thought he was once he played in the NCAAs. And that's back when all the matches were 5 sets, and Tracy Austin's brother was taught by Vic, Jeff. So here's a kid from Northern Illinois, and he was competitive with someone from UCLA. Then Hank Jungle, who was a retired Air Force officer, really believed in Tim, and he was teaching, I think, at the Kettering Racket Club in Xenia, Ohio. So he went out on the tour. He got as high as 17 in the world. So Tom, I don't think it was 2 years later, but maybe a year and a half. It's kind of like, if you can do it, I can do it. So he goes out on the tour. He was ranked in the top 50 longer than Tim. And, of course, everyone loves the Gullicksons. I did corporate outings with him. I don't know Tom. I was on the road with my son Connor out in Hawaii, and that's when Tom was with the USTA. So I have been around him since those corporate outings back in the 80s. But I remember so many things from Vic working with Tim. One was I'm invited to breakfast because I'm going to be the hitter, and it's Vic Braden, Gideon Ariel, and Tim Gullickson. And 17 in the world, the guy's a big-time tennis player. And Vic is tape recording it, just audio tape. And he goes, well, first of all, forget anything the psychologists say. It's all about physics. And then I remember Gideon Ariel saying, at that time Borg was, Borg, and he'd been in the Wimbledon final, 6 years in a row. He won it 5 straight. And you remember Gideon Ariel.
And if I can interrupt, Steve, I'd say that this was also not long after that very popular book, The Inner Game of Tennis, which was all about the psychology of tennis.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
but Gideon Arrow told Tim Gullickson, I'm going to build a machine that will beat Borg, and therefore it will also beat you. Because, you have to be able to hit targets. Actually, Tim had a place in Boca West. I remember being there one time, and I think it was his nephew. Wanted to, so we're at his townhouse, and he goes, his nephew said, you want to go see, it was during the Christmas holidays, you want to go see Lendel's townhouse? So even when you're when one of your relatives is 17 in the world, it just doesn't add up if you meet somebody who's number one in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, those guys were loved by everybody, but with so I introduced Tim to Jack Groppel, and then they became fast friends. And then Tim was on the cover of Jack's first book with. But I remember I was the hitter, and I go, Vic, you got to get somebody who can hit the ball bigger and better than I can. So Bernie Mitten, a South African, there were so many pros at that time that were living down in Newport Beach. It was so much fun at that time in the 80s. The John Wayne Tennis Club, they had that rating system 1 through 10. Bob Lutz, Stan Smith, Rod Laver, they're all members. Tracy Austin was a member. Emerson was given lessons. I remember watching Emerson. We talked about this on the podcast where, I became buddies with Roy Emerson, and I could just hang out and watch him teach. And one day, I tell the story often, Billie Jean King started snapping at me. And Roy Emerson told Billie Jean King, if you don't apologize, and I was with Kim Wittenberg, if you don't apologize to Stephen Kim, his lesson's over. But the reason I mentioned that is all those players, Vic knew all of them, and he knew their games really well. But I think the story with Bob Lutz, I was with Tim Gullickson and Bob Lutz, and it's just like, who cannot love Vic Braden? But you remember the Bob Lutz story where Vic wanted to show the world on his PBS tips that when you hit a slice backhand, the racket face is nearly vertical to hit.
Yeah, and he had him in slow mo, right?
Well, yeah. So the USTA just yesterday, they have a tip on how to hit underspin, and they have the person demonstrating put the racket face flat on top of the net, and that's how you hit slice.
Oh my God!
That might be how you take a knife and cut butter or cheese. But so anyway, Vic, nice guy Vic. He's been watching Lutz. He's known him since he was a kid. He loves how he plays. He's one of the best doubles players in the world. And so Vic calls Lutz up. He goes, I'd like to use you for a tip on PBS. And Lutz goes, I disagree with how you teach underspin backhand. And Vic goes, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I apologize. Maybe another stroke. So Vic thought about it for me. He called him back. He said, I'll tell you what, we'll just film it, and then we'll talk about it. And then Bob Lutz said, yeah, okay, that's fine. And then Vic hung up the phone and goes, we got him.
Yeah.
And then what Vic did with the film is Lutz said he went down at a 45-degree angle. So Vic puts this yellow piece of tape going down at a 45-degree angle, and Lutz's racket should have matched it. But it goes right back up. I mean, you don't stay down when you hit underspin either. It's like Johnny Mack, who says he stayed down, and Vic had film of him lifting up on both toes. And, same with like Jimmy on the serve. He could just toss to the right. And he did with getting able to do work with Jimmy. And then afterwards, and Jimmy always, fair enough, gave credit to his mother. He goes, Vic said, we'll get him out to the left because he was lefty. But Vic had some one-liners. He said, yeah, Jimmy, his serve goes 74 miles an hour, but his grunt goes 102. Gideon told Jimmy, he goes, well, your movement is spastic, because he'd actually got blisters on the top of his feet. And, of course, that's American slang that calls some kid a spaz. So Jimmy didn't like that.
That's a clinical term, yeah.
Yeah. Coming back to Vic, one time I was in New York City with Vic, and he was being mobbed like it was Beatlemania. And many times I was with Vic where I'd have to start answering questions because there's just no way that he could answer all the questions that the people were talking to him after a presentation. And I remember one guy just being belligerent, and he said, he's telling Vic over and over again, just pounding Vic, you're all wrong about Tracy Austin, all wrong about Tracy Austin. And Vic said, this, and the guy goes, this is what Tony Trabert says. And Vic just said, Tony Trabert and I are really good friends, But ask Tony; he'll tell you that I forgot more about tennis than he knows. And that's about the only time I've ever heard Vic do that. But I mean, I've heard Balotelli. When people asked him about Vic, he goes, "Oh no." He goes, and he'd say it just the other way. Balotelli has been on record many times saying he's forgot more about tennis than I know. And actually, that's just so sad that there's some people that are leading the way in American tennis, and they're looked at as highly acclaimed tennis teachers. And I mean, if you could just be there with a buzzer every time they said something that's not true, beep, 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 beep. It's just amazing how it's still, tennis is still in the Stone Ages.
Oh, speaking of buzzers, Steve, the Basin anticipatory reflex timer. You remember that?
Yeah. The stream of red lights.
The thing on the wall.
Yep.
Yeah, it's in Mike Valentine's garage right now. Waiting for a new home. That was you guys, if you guys don't, anybody listening doesn't know that was another tool that Vic used in his lectures, and it's basically by, I think her name was Ann Basson, who developed this very simple thing that sends a series of lights down a maybe 16, 20 foot line along a wall, and you had a cord with a button to push, trying to time your push of the button at the same time that the last light lit up. So it could be sent down at different speeds, and Vic would start slow, and the thing would go down to, the light would go down the wall, and then as it reached the last one, you click the button, and the box, the display would give you a readout as to how close you were to timing your push at the same time that last light lit up. So in other words, you had to anticipate when the thing would get there, and the faster the light would go down the line, the sooner you had to anticipate and push early. So it measured your anticipatory reflex timing. So, and it was basically to use to show people that everything you need to do for the point of contact for a tennis hit has to be done long before the tennis. Well, not long, but 200 or 100. Is it 125 milliseconds or 250? No, it's 125 because 250 is the other. 125 is the signal coming back to your brain. But all the preparation for the hit has to be done 125 milliseconds because that's the time it takes the signal to go from your brain to your arm or any part of your body to make a motion. So when you were less than or more and most people were way more than 125 milliseconds late on their trying to push that button and anticipate. So it's just an example of how long it takes the signal to go from your brain to your hand just to push a simple button. And here you are trying to factor in all these body motions for a hit that only lasts 4 to 6 milliseconds. So everything has to be done long before the contact point. And then, the follow-up to that is, it doesn't matter what happens afterwards. That's Vic would always say the follow-throughs just sell tickets. But we use the follow-through as a teaching tool to tell the student what happened for the majority of their stroke. But
Vic would do this, and I think this would be great for tennis teaching pros to go out and do. You can do it quite easily. Now, Vic was a really good athlete. He wasn't very big, but he was a very good athlete. He was a starting quarterback. He played basketball. He won the high school state championship 3 times in Michigan. He was a scholar and a jock all in one. But you can rally with someone, and as soon as you hit the ball, just automatically take your racket backwards. You don't even have to have a follow through. And you go out, you can rally, just get the ball right to hit, and then take your racket immediately backwards. Because now, that's like come over the ball. So, no, and now it's turn the doorknob and the windshield wiper, and
right.
It's just
and he would do that thing that Steve just explained, hit and immediately pull the racket. He would do that in his lectures, and it was a comical move, and we get a lot of laughs with that. And he would also demonstrate other follow-throughs that don't really matter because the ball is gone. It's no longer on the racket, but again, we did use the follow-through as a teaching tool to get people to stop and look and see where their racket is in relation to, their body and where the ball's supposed to be going.
Well, I do wish that Vic had stayed with Brandon, asking about pro players, that Vic had stayed with advanced players. Of course, he was in Southern Cal. What a time, the tennis boom, and everything he touched turned to gold. He worked with so many top juniors. But years later, I was doing a clinic with Vic for 2 weeks in Aspen, and near Aspen, where he had the ski college. And I said, Vic, you should be at a place like Saddlebrook. And so I go back, and I had people flying in to work with me. It was the summertime, and he said, Steve, can you meet me in Tampa? I wasn't living in Tampa at the time. I lived in Tampa for 15 years, but I said, no, I can't. I just promised these people they're here. There's no way I can go down to Tampa right now. I'd just been out of town for 2 weeks with Vic. So he went to Saddlebrook, and that's when Capriati was there. She was like the player. There's been different times where Sampras was the player, or Johnny Isner was the player. And, Jack Robel gave it a go there. But Vic, and I think Jack would readily state this, although Jack was so well informed, but Vic had spent so much time with the pros, and he had played the game. He actually used to refer to himself as a donkey, because he would be a tune-up match on the exhibition tour back in the barnstorming days. He had stories about when he was playing Bobby Riggs and won the first set, and Riggs just trash-talked him and got inside his head. But no, so Vic, he left the Kramer Club with the idea that he would, within teaching adult camps, he would be able to generate more money, because he was funding his own research. And he used to say that's $900 a shot. I know Andy's talked about that. Some of the things Vic used to do for $900 a shot, you can do on your telephone now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But even though technology has improved so much, tennis teaching, it's still either going backwards or going in circles. All you have to do is, I was at the Battle of Boca this last weekend, and, unfortunately, it looks like a lot of kids that have learned to play at a public park. They're just self-discovery, and they haven't really been trained by instructors. But, they're out there, and they've got great spirit, and they're competing. And, I watched a sparring session today with a sparring partner and a young gal, and she's out there, open racket face on the backhand, but they're there for an hour and a half and just pounding ground strokes. There's no volleys, approach volleys. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, one thing that I remember just reading about Vic and learning about Vic through Steve, and the whole concept of the ski college. Hoping you could talk about that a little bit. Mike, you there?
Mike.
Oh, me? Oh, is that directed to me? I thought you directed
yes,
at
sir,
Steve.
Yeah.
No, that's because my nose looks like a ski slope.
Yeah. You and Bob Hope, right?
My father used to look like Bob Hope. Actually, drunks would go up to my father and ask for an autograph.
No.
Yes.
So kid.
You got to be proud of that slope for the nose, baby.
Wow. No, that was at a time when I had already come back here.
Okay.
They did. Now I wasn't invited to be. Now this was not the ski, but it was Vic's. I guess maybe his early ventures into Aspen, to that part of the country. He asked me to come back and help teach a tennis college at Aspen. And I had never been to Aspen. It was a beautiful place. So get together with some old coaches, and so I did that. I forget, it was 90, maybe 91, 92. I don't know exactly when it was, but no, I was not. I was not there when he ventured into the ski college.
Yeah, you remember Gail Godwin? She was the coach at UCLA.
Yeah,
she became the head coach of the ski college, and I went out there to teach a couple times, but never in the winter. I was only there in the summer. Beautiful place. If people want to get online, there's a tribute to Vic Braden, and Gail talks about the ski college and what he brought.
Yeah, I think
what he brought to the ski community.
His teaching techniques and philosophy, and student centric teaching methods. I think it could carry over into any sport, really, and any endeavor, really, because it's a universal way of teaching. So, I don't know how well it was received as far as skiers go, but tennis-wise, I would love to know, if somebody ever wants to try to do a poll of professionals, how many of them were influenced in one way or another by Vic, either by reading his book, watching his videos, seeing his lectures. Imagine if Vic was still with us and still in good health. He would be rocking those TED lectures or those master classes that are now being, put online. He was such a great teacher. I mean, I don't know.
To backtrack, I think I might have just mentioned on the Tennis Channel instead of on YouTube. But if you go to YouTube, there's not as much of Vic on YouTube as you would think. The same thing with Gideon Ariel. But certainly you can find Vic and Gideon interviewing athletes on YouTube. But no, it's unfortunate that I think that number is diminishing. The people that are still carrying the torch.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about carrying the torch, Steve. As far as just people, players, professionals that, or even let's take it down to the college level. Top some of the better college players that have been influenced in their learning by Vic. His information is not necessarily his personality, because he's not all of them were able to attend any of his classes or anything. But I mean, it's all in the book. Tennis for the Future. What better title could there be? Because the information is still applicable. It's still relevant. It's still good, solid, evidence-based information. So, there's got to be people out there looking at that and saying, yeah, this stuff makes sense.
Well, we had Mark Walpole on the podcast, British coach. He actually purchased the Vic Braden Tennis College. And then I was part of the, the deal. Sam Olson invited me out. At that time, my former wife and Craig Tiley. Craig Tiley was kind of my right-hand man at that time. And I was saying, hey, there's a place in Vero Beach where the owner wants me to come down and start this program. And so anyway, we decided to go out to California, but then Sam, he changed the deal. That happens. It was just a handshake deal. And so anyway, I go back out because his third club, the owner said, well, if you're not in, I'm not in. And he insisted I come back out. So I went out for a couple of days, and I said, well, I told this owner, I said, would you like to spend some time with Vic Braden? Because I said, if I come to Southern Cal, that would be the biggest goal, is to get Vic reconnected with junior tennis. And at that time, Olson, Mark was just a startup, as he said, and he climbed the ladder very quickly with Sam, but he was just, I think he at one time had 12 people that I had trained, and Sam was somebody I had trained. Long story short, short story long. So this gentleman's, it was fortunate I went out there for one day just to spend time with Vic, and then the owner came out the next day. But the day I was there, just Vic and I were going to sit down and just talk about getting him back in junior tennis throughout Southern Cal. And Stan Frankert shows up, who ran the Dutch Tennis Federation. He had played tennis at USC. And if all people have to do is watch Richard Krajicek, who won Wimbledon, I think, in '96. Just watch him hit a serve. It's all there. It's all there. Yeah. So Stan shows up and he says, I just want to hang out today. And at that time, the tennis college was not going strong. Vic was in between what he should do with that operation. But that's just an example of how many people would know that the Dutch Tennis Federation used Braden's book, Tennis for the Future '77. Ruben Perchek, who you housed, you and Jackie, I brought him to the tennis college. He was good enough to make the Colombian Davis Cup team. So actually, it's a fun story. He was at the Orange Bowl, and I couldn't get down there for the first day. And Danny Cooper, who later became a head coach for Vic Braden in Europe, Cooper was going to be at the Orange Bowl. And he said, well, how will I find him? I said, just walk around the courts. You'll know who he is. All you got to do is watch him hit a ball. And sure enough, he he spotted Perchek in a heartbeat, and the coach from Israel came up and said to Perchek, "You like Vic Braden?" So people knew.
Yeah.
Like at one time in Israel, just like in China, I mean, people used Tennis for the Future, and no, it really should be. It's one of those books that you got to memorize. It's not light
Yeah.
reading. You know, it's just, you got to read this over and over again. You have to study it. You have to know the information. And
Take it out on the court. I tell everybody, take it out on the court. Do some of the drills that are in there. Yeah.
yeah, but Vic was not. You know, Santana passed away just a couple weeks ago, and I was with him. Actually, I was with Vic, and the purpose was for Vic to meet Danny Cooper. And so here's a guy who's won Wimbledon. Famous story. He goes, "Grass is for cows," but he still won Wimbledon. We won the French Open, and everybody loves Manuel Santana. And Vic was going, "I'm with these guys." And it's, you know, Vic never forgot the little guy. And he was never starstruck by the top players. You know, that's where I think with Vic, you could learn that you treat the famous like they're not, and those that are not like they are.
Yeah.
I think that so many people sell out. Vic used to say that the player doesn't change. The player has some success early on. You see it in junior tennis all the time. The player doesn't change, but all the people around the player, they change. It's almost like the coaches are groupies. You know, and they're just, they're just, edifying. This kid's great. This kid's great. And, you know, they really, they meet the kid when they're 14, 15 years old, and there's just no connection between what happened in the really early age groups.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, coming back to the differentiation of instruction. As far as I know, you've been, like you said, you haven't been in the tennis trenches in the last few years. But when you look at all the popularization of large tennis academies, I just experienced this with my last lesson today. But when you look at the large group numbers versus private lessons, just in your experience with Vic, how can you kind of talk about the drawbacks, and the benefits, academies versus private lessons?
Well, I have a tough. I set a high bar, because I saw how those academies, if we want to call them, or institutional group lessons, how they can work effectively. At the tennis college, man, that was it. That was the formula right there. The only other thing I've seen come close to that was without the lanes, but with the same level of effectiveness, was in Hillsborough County. Was it Hillsborough Community College, Steve? Is that where you had your place that Kevin went to?
Brandon and I spent a lot of hours there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I sent my son down there, and Steve was tolerant enough to put him up for a week and deal with his dirty towels on the floor. But I hope it wasn't anything like Ruben Perchik's room. But no, that was a camp that was run the same way, same effectiveness. Just didn't have some of the resources that they like the teaching lanes, in place, and the classroom with the rear projection screens and all the stuff that Vic had at the tennis college. And I saw at the other end. I probably shouldn't go there, but another high-end tennis academy that I sent my son to, where I saw the opposite, where it was just a factory, just running kids through, let them hit a lot of balls, not much information put forth. Everybody swinging their own way, and that was a waste of money. So that's the personal experience with that. You know, Vic was not. There's a lot. It could be we could debate whether what Vic would have done to the junior culture and effort throughout the country had he gone the junior route. But he chose to go the adult tennis to the masses route because he fully believed in the power of the sport to change people's lives. And, you know, he felt his goal was to make more people learn quicker so they could play longer. You know, that was his mission statement. You know, have more people learn faster so they could play longer. You know, and my dad was a good example of that. He played well into his 80s. You know, he was still playing when he had elective heart surgery that he, you know, didn't have some complications from, but he would still be out there. You know, so that's the beauty of the sport. It's a lifetime sport, and it can keep people happy and healthy. And you know, that's whether it's group lessons or individual lessons. I think that is up to the individual too. It goes back to the differentiation of instruction. It depends on what the student wants. Going back to the Vic's use of technology and high-speed film. Steve, remember what he said about Reggie Jackson?
Yeah.
You know, Vic made the effort to take the cameras and go film Reggie Jackson somewhere. I forget what it was, up in New York or somewhere where he was close by, and because he wanted. This was after Reggie did his 4 home runs and 2 World Series in a row. 3 in 1 World Series game, and he started off the second game with a home run and 4 at bats. It's just incredible. So he films Reggie Jackson, and then he says, "All right, Reggie, let's take." He gets the film back. Let's take a look at it. He goes, "I don't need to see it. I don't need to see that. He tell me or show me." In other words, demonstrate. He wanted to see it demonstrated, or he wanted somebody to tell him what to do. He found no value whatsoever in seeing his swing in high speed, slow motion. I mean, that just blew me away. That somebody at his level, a professional level, would not be interested in seeing that. But it's an example of the difference in how people learn. Well,
I think one thing that I think we should touch upon Vic Braden themes, but Jeff Lewis, who we trained as a player, then as a teacher, he one time was doing a lot of projects for Vic at Koda. He asked Vic, why didn't you certify pros? And Vic said, I should have. He had his course, USTA, United States Tennis Academy, but, Vandermeer with the PTR, you think of, just the insurance and the membership, the dues, that would have been great. I think Mark Walpole, who actually sold the Koda de Caza facility, and was it, his last name is Pack, I think, Bill Pack.
Bob Pack, yeah.
Bob Pack is still sitting there. The USTA, they should have bought that because my understanding with the HOA, the Homeowners Association, have 100% of the vote, which you'll never get. And that facility should just be reopened. And Mark said it, is that we need to train coaches. And I think that's what should happen with Braden methodology. I met with Scott Schultz. He started at Fair Stages a couple of years after we revised the program at Tyler Junior College, and he was talking about certification, and that's when Lake Nona was more bulldozers than tennis balls. And I said, you just need to use it. Vic used to say that he was the original Fat Albert. He used to call himself Fat Albert before Bill Cosby had the cartoon Fat Albert. And they just need to go back to that book, Tennis for the Future. And, people now say it's old school. And, you used a term earlier that, we get criticized for being a cookie cutter. Well, what if you're trying to make a gingerbread man? Is it okay to use a cookie cutter? And, people can just flip it, turn it around. And, are we going to get kids to sing the alphabet, or is that too much? Is that too cookie cutter? Are we going to just drop the multiplication tables?
Right.
But
learn to hit the same old boring shot.
Yeah. That would be a theme. Hit the same old boring shot. Another one would be with be an independent thinker and a problem solver. Be your own coach. When you miss, why you missed, figure it out. The one that we pound into the ground, it sounds like mechanical prayer. The dimensions of the court and physical laws dictate stroke production, no coach's opinion or any unique theory. I was with Vic.
It's got a ring to it.
Yeah. I was with Vic one time when we were doing a camp, and I say, "Hey Vic, check this out." Everybody repeat after me. He got a big kick out of that. And you just think, that's where you don't have too many tennis arguments. If you know the dimensions of the court and you know physical laws, but if you're out there and you don't know the dimensions of the court, and you don't know what makes the ball spin with true topspin, you're an imposter. You're just not well informed. And really then and I've been so much in the kid business, how can you look a kid in the eye if you're making it up chapter by chapter, sentence by sentence?
Yeah, and what you said reinforces that Vic's insistence that it wasn't a Vic Braden method, because he would start out early in his lecture saying, "I can't teach you how to play tennis. I can only teach you how to teach yourself." And I would love to see the academy, well, whatever it's called, teaching the teachers start up again. But that's why I said it would be great for pros to, in whatever capacity that it have in it, for them to talk about how Vic, the man, Vic, the resource, Vic, the information, how it affected their teaching, their learning, their careers. Back in the day when he was referring to himself as Fat Albert, a lot of the pros maybe only saw the humor, and and even Vic would be self-deprecation, about calling himself a little fat funny guy, but now he's got he's a Hall of Famer, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. It's been his influence has been recognized. It's time for some of these pros to not admit, just recognize that that he has had an influence on their lives, whatever way it happened. That would go a long way to helping create a Vic Braden Tennis Academy, or whatever you want to call it. It's a shame we can't use I still have my sticker, my patch, Steve. The patch that we got graduating from the USTA, the little like a shield looking thing, and it says USTA on it. But anyway, that was it was a great time.
I met with John Embry, who runs the USPTA. I don't know him at all, really. Class act. I know a lot of people speak very highly of him. He was with Wilson, I think, for a long time. And, he knew Vic on a personal level. But then to know the tennis side of it. We say Vic the man and Vic the resource. And I told him, I said, I think there's 15,000 members. I've been a member as a tester for a long, long time. And I feel like, Mark Twain, every time you meet someone, you meet your master, that I could learn from each and every one of the USPTA pros. The buzzword, a catchphrase, a drill, and on and on and on. In the big picture to the little picture. But you say, well, I just don't think there's many people in the organization that know 19.1 degrees. They don't know you spin the racket, eight times at 360 degrees, divide 360 by 8. They don't know 45 degrees. And Vic's thing is you don't know the rationale. So I need to go forward with this. We're taking steps in that direction to try to do what we're doing, but do it better. Vic had that test, the USTA Academy test, something just along those lines, like with 200 questions. And it really should be that everyone should take that test. Simple things like how long is a ball on the strings? How long does it take to register the hit in the brain? And, so someone's hitting a serve and you tell them, well, you're sneaking a peek. And I think people agree that you don't snap your head like you have whiplash on the serve. But like with what's going on with the forehand, and that's really where the arguments begin and end. I think Andy Fitzell, he would be one to say, how many times did people criticize you're giving out free content, and they would say, oh, that's not the modern forehand. But the laws of physics haven't changed.
Right.
Vic the man and Vic the resource. As I said earlier, that people would get to know Vic, and then right away it's like, hey, this is Uncle Vic. Someone who you helped out when she was with Scotty Perelman first, Jennifer Roberts. She was the assistant coach at Kansas, and she spent 2 years with us at Tyler Junior College. Then
She was.
Go ahead.
She was great guy, great kid. I mean, she was really good.
So then she spent a year running the place out in Utah.
Yep, St. George.
St. George. And Mark Jakes was there. Dave Nostrand was there. Young Andy Fitzell was there. And so then she goes to Illinois. And then Tiley, before he went to Illinois, he had done a couple weeks in California, a couple weeks in Cape Cod. So, he had met Vic personally, but we would say that, he knew Vic Braden backwards and forwards, upside down, Vic Braden the resource, not necessarily Vic Braden the man. They had Vic on the Illinois campus, and then in recent times, Vic went down to Australia. Tiley runs the Australian Open, but that's what should happen. Is obviously now, people can't have the privilege that you and I had to know Vic Braden the man, but they still can know Vic Braden the resource.
And there's still plenty on it on record. The library he created. I hope Tennis Channel does something with that. I mean, the CEO Ken Solomon told Melody and I that there will be a Vic Braden channel, whether it's on YouTube or Tennis Channel. Even he sees the movement away from cable, but there should be. There's enough content there to, but whether they'll be able to handle it properly, I don't know.
Yeah, Vic's vacant lot. He was ABD, all but dissertation. He never, once they told him that, he thought a young kid could be helped more, as a psychologist could help a kid more on the playground versus being in the office, the old story, lay on the couch and talk to the shrink.
Yeah.
And they turned him down, and then he turned his back on academia and was, again, all but dissertation. There's so many things from some.
I don't know if
go ahead.
I don't know if you have a copy of that LA Times interview.
Yeah, I know.
I know. Yeah, about when it gets into the power of sports, which he often did, and it's one of his most poignant parts of his lectures when he talked about his motivation and coming from the power of sports to affect people. And he would ask for a show of hands. I've been in the classroom many a time, and he talks about this in that interview when he asked for a show of hands from people in the classroom, how many have had an incident in sports that affected their lives to this day, either positive or negative. And it's 100%. Almost, every hand goes up, whether it was not being picked on a playground for a team or, scoring a winning touchdown or whatever it was. The power of sports to affect and change people's lives, hopefully positive, but it can also affect it negatively. It's something he was always cognizant of and worked to help those effects be on the positive side. And that certainly could be said for the people that came through the tennis college. Only one that I was aware of that tried to sue him. She was on my court. the lady that the ball glanced off, and I was right there, and it was on a video court, so it's not like we didn't have any proof. But she said the ball machine was set wrong and it hit her in the eye. But it's just one of those things that came off the racket. But
actually, Vic, backing up, especially in team sports, I think that I think more and more kids are getting bad information in tennis teaching, but there's lots of kids who get a bad deal in team sports, especially when they let the parent coach. They're going to favor their own child. Back to the library, and I mean, I can remember giving Artis Gilmore tennis lessons, VIP.
There you go.
And I remember telling him that he was too short to hit down on the serve, or he was too short. He was like 7'3", I
Yeah.
remember it's so strange to be teaching someone who's 7'3". I go, "You're too short. You can't hit down on the serve." And he said, "No one has ever told me I'm too short." But one thing is in that library, Vic was a really good basketball player, and every once in a blue moon you'd see him in the gym, and he was just good.
I
He could
I
dribble
had
the
the privilege.
basketball. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had the privilege of playing with him one night because we had Tuesday night basketball in that gym, and one night he shows up and he's ready to play, and man, you had to be ready for the no look pass. But yeah, he was fast, and that was his first love. I think it was his first coaching.
No, for
he
sure.
He coached basketball before he coached tennis.
And Vic used to say, "Hey, if you like basketball and you just want to shoot in the driveway, just go shoot in the driveway. No one says you have to play." But
Right.
but Artis Gilmore, he's in the gym at Kodo, and he's stuffing the basketball, and then you see Braden stuffing the basketball. So Gilmore stuffs one, Braden stuffs one, and it's like, wow, that's pretty good, Vic. And the camera fades away, and Vic's on a trampoline. Yeah. No, there's a lot of fun things. It's too bad that I think the library, you and I've talked over and over again, getting in the right hands. But I think it also should be a working archive. And I think that's one thing.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do with the GreatBase, we feel that we should have called it solid fundamentals. Because I mean, it's amazing that I'm thinking who could argue with young people, whether it's a beginning adult or beginning kid, starting with a GreatBase. I think everyone would agree that no matter what you're pursuing, that you have to start with a GreatBase. Vic, coming back to being sued, Vic used to say that there was a guy who he thought was going to sue the tennis college because he said that wasn't him on the film. And Vic, and Vic always had the punchline. He goes, and he was in a group with all women. Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of his story of when he knew that video was the tool that he needed when he first used video, and he had he filmed a group, men and women, and he gets them into the video room at tennis college, and this is before cassettes, guys. It was open reel video. You know what an open reel tape player is, right? It's on the reels. Yeah, this was before VHS video cassette. This was open reel video that we used in '79. So Vic, the first time he used it, and he brings it up on the film, and he's showing this lady her forehand or whatever, forehand and backhand, and I mean, he said she was just rapt. She's eyes are locked on the screen, and she's just totally captivated by that. And he's going over what she should be doing, taking the racket down lower and maybe bending her knee some more. And then he turns and says, "Do you have any questions?" And she goes, "My God, I didn't know my thighs were that big." That's what was captivating her. She was just watching, what she was watching. But eventually, he found the real value in the video as a learning tool. But if that showed him the ability to grab people's attention at least.
Yeah, the lens. What do they say? The lens puts on 10 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah. No. I mean, my two big takeaways from all this. I think education, not ego. And Vic being so ahead of his time. I mean, we have this performance center in South Florida, and now you're just talking about the pneumatic exercise equipment. We've got a piece of equipment that sounds very similar. I'm not going to disclose how much we paid for it, but I mean, considering they were talking about that in the 70s and the 80s, and now that's considered, state of the art.
Cutting edge.
That's considered cutting edge. And then also too, the light, the base and red light mechanism you were talking about, that's now being those kind of light displays working on athletes' reaction time. I see a sponsored ad on social media for those things every single day, and you'd kind of shudder to think of the cost of one of those pieces of equipment. But I think that stuff's all really. I think those two takeaways, the education, not ego, just everything you said, from actually inviting people to challenge him on his methodologies and his information. Being so comprehensive in his approach, being able to not have such a massive ego to then invite NASA and Caltech to be part of his tennis academy. And then just the combination of background in psychology and biomechanics, the ability to factor in, someone's anxiety, but then also have the background in human physiology and technique to work that as well. Just, fascinating to listen to you talk about all those things, but just a great reminder that we all should go back and revisit his content.
Starting with Go for a Winner. I probably lost count of how many times I watched that because it was shown every Saturday and every Tuesday, I believe it was. Yeah, the chalk talk. No, the chalk talk, the one that Steve talked about with the doubles. He called it mixed doubles, but right. All the strategies are applicable to whatever double.
100%. He goes, it's a fantastic adventure. But you could run to someone like Tommy Fye, like yourself, Vic. He loved Tommy Fye, and you could see Fye to this day and go, who's in trouble? Two.
Two, exactly.
Who's in trouble?
Yeah.
Two. And
it's like knowing the lines of a favorite movie. Yeah.
Meaning, player number two. Brandon's point about Vic being ahead of his time. Warren Pretorius came to help us with a workshop more than one time, but one time he was there, and we were filming, but this is back when you had to change whether it's VHS or the DVD, whatever, or the battery. So we didn't get Warren on film saying this, but at one time, Warren, he said so much to do with Dartfish, and now he runs a company, Tennis Analytics, intellectual, bright guy. And he certainly would have a high appreciation for Braden. So Warren, what he said about Dartfish, and Dartfish, Vic was, he was helping Warren with advertising, and there was a commercial or there was an ad that said, "Hi, I'm Vic, I Dartfish." But what Warren said in this workshop, and we didn't get it on film, he said, basically what Dartfish is doing is what Vic Braden was doing 30 years ago.
Wow.
And it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I think with Galway, we talked about that book just recently. Brandon brought it up, and he had a way of really relaxing people. So did Vic with his humor. Galway just had a way to get people to be relaxed and slow down and hit the ball, quote unquote, smoothly. But Vic used to just say, shut up and show me how to hit it. Like how do you hang on to it? And I went to the tennis academy, then I went back, and there was a guy who had not changed his grip on the forehand side, and he had a roll, racket face was open because of the continental grip. And Vic went out, the guy wanted another lesson, so he was just a very extroverted guy, and anybody wanted to help, and he just jumped out on the court. So, at that time, we were like the only two repeaters, so we knew each other from the previous course, because I went to it back-to-back 6 months apart, went in April and went back in December. So Vic isn't talking to a guy about changing his grip, and he's just telling him to push the palm down. And so I remember someone asked, well, why aren't you changing the grip? And Vic goes, I'm not a toad. He was here before. He didn't change the grip the last time. So and he goes, if he's back. Actually, I remember with Jack Groppel, having breakfast with Jack Groppel and Tim Gullickson, and I was there as the hitter with Gully, and Jack wasn't. And Jack said, well, Vic probably told you to change the grip, or Vic told you to change the grip. And I said, no, he didn't. I mean, you don't have to tell someone to change their grip. I mean, if in our world, we get kids that are 13, 14 years old, they want to play college tennis, and, really their game, they need to just go back to the drawing board. You can't work within their game. But if someone comes to you like Tim Gully, and, he's 17 in the world, you could say, like that Lendl versus McEnroe. And Vic just had it. He had such an eye for it. Because, he was someone who was actually, he got out there and fed balls. He actually taught tennis. A lot of people that are professing tennis now, they really haven't taught tennis. They haven't taught beginners. They haven't done the hard yard. So McEnroe and Lendl both had the same grip on the backhand side, but McEnroe rolled it with the racket face open, had to recruit the muscles to turn it. And that's one of the reasons that he wanted to get to the net as soon as possible. Where Lendl, he just turned the wrist down. But Lendl's the one who had the racket face closed, and it then went up. I had a large office on this one college campus, and we had 12 photos right up by the top of the wall and where the ceiling meets. And each one is you go through, and it was, for example, Chrissy Everett on the backhand where the racket face is closed. Now, granted, people say, she hit side spin, she could hit slice, she did all these things with her backhand. That's because she had the framework to do that. But, how does somebody win 125 matches in a row on clay? I mean, she could hit it. With, that's where Vic, where Chrissy on her toss on her serve and how her elbow came down. And, he wasn't saying that, she's a toad. He's going, no, this girl's won, 15, 16, 17. I think it ended up being 18 Grand Slams, but that she could have even been better. And the thing is that, and he was the one with getting arrow where they had the equipment to measure and say, well, if you did this and you did that, how much faster the ball would go. With, you remember Hartman? What was Hartman's first name? He was on Good Morning America. David Hartman.
David Hartman, yeah.
So that was a VIP lesson I was assigned to, and he's there with his wife and 2 little kids, and he played a high level pro baseball, and he just told me I really like golf. I'm here because my wife likes tennis. So Vic was so big. I said, Vic, the guy loves golf. He goes, all right, we'll film him. Next thing you know is they're on the Good Morning America show like a week later. I remember telling my mother this. She said, hey, yeah, Mom, this is how close I am to the big time. Because she used to watch that show in the morning. And I go, yeah, Uncle Vic. I mean, next thing you know, he films Hartman. And then he's doing and Gideon Arrow was part of it. Gerald Ford was president. So they have Nicholas, Gerald Ford, and David Hartman hitting golf balls.
Jeez.
And all that, it's just science. It's just that all that just stands the test of time. I mean, Newton and Galileo. It's a great line. They were here before us. Let's go with a couple more here. McLaughlin's getting past your bedtime, I think.
Yeah, no. Like I said, I could go on forever because golf, man. The golf study. This was years later, well into the Koda Research Center when they brought in the Iron Byron. Were you there for that?
No, I don't think so. Go ahead.
It was this machine that the golf USGA, what a golf association owns, that is modeled after the swing of Byron Nelson. They call it Iron Byron. It looks like a moon lander. It's an amazing example of what it takes to replicate a human motion. This thing, we had to bring in a industrial compressor. We had to screw it down into the asphalt at the on the court at the research center, and then they had to spend a couple of days setting it up. But it was designed to basically test golf clubs because it could crank a swing harder than a human could, and so it would stress the golf clubs to the breaking point, and they would know how for the design of the strength and the of the clubs. But for this project, they were going to test golf balls. So they had to set it up with a regular 1 or 2 clubs or whatever. So the clubs would be the same, but then they would change out the balls. And once they got it set up, all the golfers, there were a number of coaches that were golfers, but they were drooling because they could set this thing up to hit a 300-yard drive and place it in about a 3-foot circle consistently, So once they knew that they had it set up, then they could change balls and then determine what the difference was. But they wanted to shoot at ultra high speed. Now, this is the kind of thing these days can be done digitally, but back then it had to be mechanically. Most of the high speed film that you guys have seen with Vic's slow-mo work is 400 to 500 frames per second. That was efficient to see the racket clearly at impact, and it also was efficient for film use because the faster you shoot, the faster you go through film. But this shoot was going to be at 11,000 frames per second. This is physical film now. They brought in a specialist. It was like the pro from Dover. This guy. It was called a high cam. They still make them, I think, but they're digital now. But only a few people in the country knew how to operate this thing, which was basically two motors and a lens. The motors would crank the film through at that speed, and then the lens would record it. So, the faster if you know film, the faster you go, the more light you need. And this was in broad daylight. It was bright sun, but it wasn't bright enough. So they had to bring in, first we tried reflectors, and that wasn't bright enough. This is shining on a golf ball now. And then they brought in hot lights. They had to put so much light there that if they left the ball on the tee too long, it would start to melt. So it was really this amazing coordination, this dance where they had to get the machine pumped up with the compressor, so it would crank the arm back with the club ready to swing. And then they would have to start the cameras because the film does not get to 11,000 frames right to the start. And only the last couple hundred feet are traveling at that speed. So the film would just go, just wind through the aperture, and then they would start so it would be lights, camera, action. The same kind of thing. The camera but the camera was just these motors firing, and then the last thing would be to put the ball on the tee. And then somebody pulled the trigger for the Iron Byron to swing. It took most of a day to get that coordination down, but once they got it down, they were able to do it. And then when we got the film back, out of the 400 feet of film, it goes so fast that the last couple feet of the film, it shreds the sprockets. The sprockets are just the film was pulled through the sprockets so fast that it shreds. So, and to make it even more technical, 11,000 frames per second. That's at full frame, 16 millimeter frame. So what they did is they shot half frame, which doubled the rate of film. So that actually what it came out to be was 22,000 frames per second. And out of that 22,000 frames, out of that 400-foot reel of film, it was only the last couple frames, last few frames, actually only six frames had the ball in contact with the club. And it was cool watching it, cranking it through the viewer and waiting for the ball's just sitting there. And it wasn't until the very end. And then you see the club head come in, click, click, click the frame by frame. And then it compresses the ball, the golf ball, you've probably seen it by now, compresses almost in half before it leaves the club. But, that was it. And I spent a lot of time. Remember, this was back in when personal computers were just getting started, so they were still using mainframes. And the computer that they used to transfer, to digitize a human movement, or in this case, a golf ball movement, was room size. It was like the size of a walk-in closet or bigger. And then they projected it onto a screen. Now, for motion movement, they mark the person's body and such. But back then, they had to digitally on a touch screen with a pen. They had to mark the joint of a person if they were doing a person, or in this case, a golf ball. We tracked the flight of the golf ball for the full 300 yards, and that was a crazy day or two, or a week actually.
I remember having Vic come to this place or that place, bringing him in and to get as many people in the room, say on an opening night, bring them for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Friday have it be open to just not just tennis enthusiasts, but sport enthusiasts. But if all you would have to do is say, Vic, I got golfers in the room. And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
And he can talk about golf. I mean, basketball. The one thing I think that people should learn from Vic is every time you talk to people, there's definitely someone in the audience that knows more about it than you do. There's a physicist, there's an engineer, there's a psychologist.
Right.
I think that would help everybody as a speaker. One thing for our audience, Mike spent, more than a decade at Koda day in and day out. Now, I know you went to Germany and you worked as a consultant in new sites, and you were at the machine or the project with the lanes. But for me, I was on the staff at Koda de Caza. I was just there, just shy of 2 years, and then I was going to go work for Vic in Europe. I was going to be in Rheinwinkel in the Alps, Germany, in the summertime, and then Marbella, Spain, in the wintertime. Of course, in Marbella, Spain, in the wintertime, everybody's pretty much, all the tourists are speaking German. But I had this clause: if I went to Tyler Junior College, if that job opened up and they would allow me to go to revise the curriculum, then I was out of the agreement to go to Europe. So I remember being at the U.S. Open with Vic, and I said, I will know within a week which way I'm going. But anyway, that was like 84. That took place in 81, but by 84, maybe 85, every Vic Braden Tennis head coach from that point forth, that his sites were trained. I trained them, except for Luke Wickham, who actually is great friends with Vic as well, and he's very similar brain type as Vic. But then Luke did go through our training. But one story I'd like to share: one of our husband-wife that we trained, and we trained many husband-wives, and they've done great things for other people throughout their lives, but they were a head coach combined in Europe for Vic. And they left, and they wrote Vic about all the problems. And I remember Vic telling me, and he wasn't, it was like, whoa, it kind of hit you like, okay, Vic's giving me some hard juice here, some strong stuff. Is I don't want people to tell me what the problems are. I want people to tell me what the solutions are. And I just think that's the way Vic's brain operated, is how can we do this better? To touch upon this, I mean, Hollywood, you must have met a lot more stars from Hollywood. Who comes to your mind, just 2 or 3 people that you remember teaching from Hollywood?
Oh, well, one at the top of the list was my childhood idol. I was a big fan of the TV show, the scuba diving TV show, Sea Hunt. You guys old enough to remember Sea Hunt?
Lloyd Bridges, right?
Lloyd Bridges, yeah. Da, 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 da. The theme song is still in my head. I mean, that's how much I loved that show. And I had the joy of working with him, one-on-one on the court. He was in a group, but also he asked for some, individual work, and what a great guy. He was just, the nicest guy.
Yeah, I didn't work with him, but he was on Seinfeld. He later in his life, he was on Seinfeld.
Mendelbaum, yeah, right.
He was a fitness freak.
Yeah, that was a funny.
He was in the water. He was swimming.
Yeah.
How about another one?
You remember Chevy Chase, right?
Yeah, I remember. I could tell Chevy Chase stories all day long.
He was the funniest one. Was he was in it? Yeah, he just was in a group. I mean, when I went around with the group of 6, and one of the guys in the group was just a real jerk. Whether he was trying to overcompensating because Chevy was in his group or what, but the guy was a jerk. This is plain and simple. And so one time when we left the video court to go to the lanes, all the courts had locks for after hours, just padlocks, And as he was late getting out of the court, and Check was the last one to leave, so he shuts the gate and locks him in, put the padlock on it, snapped it shut.
Yeah, then you went up on the deck, which was like 3 courts away, and took his shoes off, put his feet up on the railing, and held up his orange juice, and let the guy know that he was very comfortable sitting up on the deck. Chevy was there when Ruben Perchek was there, so I remember telling Vic, I said, "Yeah, I'm working with this kid, and he just got back from Junior Wimbledon. He lost to Matt Anger. Matt Anger coaches University of Washington, has for a long time. He was, he dated Tracy Austin way back when. But yeah, he's a top 50 player, but he was like the number 1 American, and so I remember Vic used to walk his dogs, and he would come by to help us, like 2 minutes turned into 2 hours. But so I was at the National Teachers Conference, and so I mean, there's hundreds of people in the room, and it was really fun. He was showing Chevy strokes and Ruben strokes. So it's Chevy Chase and myself up on this big screen, and Vic goes, and Chevy's the one with the hat on. Everybody started laughing. I remember Vic used to do this. He goes, Steve, if you'd come up to the net, hold the racket up, extend your arm, I'd hold my arm and racket way up, and he'd hit the ball over my racket.
Right.
And then he would say, it only took us 3 months to train Steve to do that. he had some amazing lines.
He did.
No, I remember, the TV show Lassie, the mother and the father.
Uh-huh.
She went through the program. Who else?
Lockhart.
Yeah, Lockhart. Yeah.
Yeah, June Lockhart.
Yeah. I'm teaching Lassie's mom.
Yeah. George Papard, the A-team guy. He went through with his son, Christian, Christian was real sweet, a real nice kid. I was Earth, Wind and Fire, Maurice White.
Yeah.
I was a big Earth, Wind and Fire fan, and I think Barry Gordy too, the Motown guy. He went through. Geez.
Yeah, there's from movies to sitcoms to I mean Vic himself.
Yeah.
I remember I've tried to find it on YouTube, but I remember he was on Hollywood Squares. He was that good. With Paul Lynn and the others, where he'd just come up with that one liner. Just like flat out. Chevy Chase, come back to Chevy. He said, we're down in the stadium, the research court, and I just yelled out, because you had to walk down the stairs. They were rubberized, made out of the same material as a track, so a tartan surface. And so I yelled out, hey, Chevy, why don't you fall down the stairs like he did on Saturday Night Live?
Oh, geez.
So he walks down the stairs, and he turns around, walks back up, and so anyway, Vic goes, can you do that again so we could film it? But he rolled down. He didn't do it a second time, so Vic didn't get it on film. But he rolled, and then he told us his technique is that he didn't roll straight down. He would roll to the side to break his momentum and slow down. But and he was a big guy too.
He was. Yeah, he's like 6'4". Yeah.
Yeah. No, I could repeating myself from the podcast we had on Vic, but Evelyn Ashford. She was the number one sprinter in the world. So, I mean, I've just been around through Vic, world-class athletes. I think, my older brother, I remember being around the pro hockey players, but the hockey players back in the day when he was assistant coach for the Rangers, they'd have a skate from 11 to 1. They'd go to a pizza pub restaurant. They'd have lunch and dinner there. I mean, they would be there from 2 in the afternoon to past midnight. They weren't stronger, but they were tougher. But Evelyn Ashford, so they have her run 40 yards.
Yeah.
And then they go, can you do that again? And she didn't know she had to do it again. And she said, yeah, I can do it again. So, I mean, 45 minutes go by, and she's doing all these routines and stretching. And Vic goes, I would have just had another donut. And Fat Albert, just so funny.
Were you there when the volleyball USA volleyball team trained? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Slazenger, right? From Israel.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was his first name?
Ari
Slazenger. Yeah. They took a girl from Koda. It was a walk on. And that was 1980, and the Olympics were boycotted.
Right. No, I'm thinking of '84 when it was in LA.
Okay, I wasn't around. I wasn't in Kodo on a regular basis at that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was. I mean, my idea of volleyball until I saw those women play was like a little picnic sport, kind of like people in America think of badminton.
Yeah.
With
Ari was the first coach at any level I've ever heard say it's the stomach muscles are the most important for an athlete. I mean, that's the way he put it. But nowadays they call it the core, but back then he was, he had those girls in shape.
With one of the best experiences I had with Vic was I had already been, and I created this slideshow, Do's and Don'ts. I was teaching PE teachers at Texas A&M, and that opportunity opened up because I had coached some players that were on the team, and what the Aggie spirit. So I'm at A&M, and this goes back in the 80s. I've been there, with Steve Denton in different experiences. He's the most recent coach. He's been there for 10 plus years, I would say. But so I had this young kid. He ended up playing, ironically, at Texas, Clayton Stanley. And it's so easy if you're living in Texas. You got to borrow A&M clothes and you got to borrow Texas clothes. And we had him looking so goofy wearing Longhorn clothes, wearing that like a big cowboy hat and shoes on the wrong foot that were too big and a sock on one foot, no sock on the other foot. And just like in Vic's book, where you're leaning back and you're just in this awkward position trying to hit a backhand. Then we had him wear A&M clothes. So this program I did for several years, we would teach the PE teachers, and it was a hall. There had to be 300 people in the room. They're all PE majors. But universities like that, they're like a small city. So we took Vic. And how we ended up taking Vic was that he came to Tyler, Texas every other year. And we got to the point where the local teaching pros were not supporting Vic Braden coming. They either loved us or hated us, and anybody associated with us. So I said, okay, we're not going to get that many locals to come. What we'll do is have Vic come here on Thursday all day, Friday morning, then we'll take him to A&M. And I remember, to go off on a tangent, a club president calling me up and going, we'd like to have our pros come and listen to Vic. I said, they're more than welcome. I said, but I've invited them now 3-4 times and they don't show. So anyway, back to the Texas A&M story. I said, Vic, I got this slideshow. I think you're going to have some fun with it. And, I had fun with it. The Aggies it was like a football game that they had won with a blowout because, they get up and they stamp their foot and they go in a circle. And when they score a touchdown, the Aggie gets to kiss his girlfriend. So anyway, they're going, it's like a football game and they're screaming. So that's when I did it. Just imagine so Vic did that. That was like, that guy was such an entertainer. He worked in the crowd. He just knew how to pause, wait for the line. It was great.
Yeah, that was his genius. He was an entertainer, but he was also an educator, and going back to something Brandon said a while back is that, he never underestimated the intelligence of his audience. He knew that it was a broad spectrum of society, and he never took them for granted. He never talked down to them. I don't know if you do this in your lectures, Steve, but when the information got too heavy, when it was full of angles and degrees and the physics, he would say, all right, I know some of you saying, look, Vic, I just came here to learn how to pick the ball up, by tapping the ball with your foot, or, he knew when to go easy or when to insert the humor. And again, that was the psychologist in him, to bring people back around to paying attention and getting that good information. So, if anybody still,
I always think one of my brothers was, who passed away, is really, really funny and quick-witted, and think he could have been a professional comedian if he learned to make fun of himself. I think that's what most comedians do first. Rodney Dangerfield's got to be the best at that. But but Vic would always use the pronoun we. This is what we toads do. And even I love Bud Collins, but Bud Collins used to refer to the American public as fellow hackers. And a lot of people, they didn't want to be called a hacker, but yeah, Vic wouldn't say, this is what you do on the serve. You do this wrong. You do this wrong. It's like, this is what we have a tendency to do. But yeah, we need to have you on time and time again. There's so many things that I think people would love to hear about Vic Braden. Let's go a couple more questions and we'll wrap it up here.
If anybody's still listening, yeah.
Speaking about us toads, just from your experience working with Vic and a lot of tennis players, I would say, a lot of recreational tennis players as well coming in to the tennis college. Did you guys notice any one particular flaw technically that was maybe above and beyond more prevalent than others?
The most common flaw or difficulty for
just
for people?
first thing that comes to mind. Yeah, what you recognize.
To me, it's getting the racket lower than the ball. The lifting aspect, because people, the see-through net, fools the eyes. getting the racket on the same level as the object to be struck, that's common sense, but you have to fight common sense, get the racket lower than the ball to be able to lift it. That's why, Vic would start the lectures, and we all start our lectures by talking about tennis as a lifting game. There's so many other difficulties, but that may be one of the most difficult, because that leads into, once they start lifting it, then it goes too high. Then you start to talk about how the racket face, the ball goes where you aim it. The racket face is pointed wrong. It's not the upward swing. So, what do you think, Steve?
No, for years and years, Vic would say number one flaw is people don't get the racket below the ball. Towards the end of his life, he did so much work studying the brain. As he said, the number one tennis tip would let the other person think they're going to lose. Get not that phrase, get inside their head, because you talk about the motor programming. Once your opponent starts to think they're going to lose, they lose coordination because they're functioning in a different part of the brain. But I think also too.
Yeah, that's where he would go off into the dinkers, right? Because here's one more opportunity for you to lose.
Yeah, he loved Kramer. Let them take gas just one more time. Let them miss. House full of trophies. Also to palm up. We have
on the serve.
Yeah, we have a list of easily like 25. Ideas where someone's serving. Vic used to go out and get everybody laughing, and all these people go through all these idiosyncrasies, gyrations, and they just patty cake the ball in. But ways to change someone from palm up to palm down. Vic used to say, if you can change someone from palm up to palm down, you can teach tennis. Now, the one thing, though, is a lot of people don't even recognize palm up. I was with a brother-sister. The brother, Victor Lilov, he just got to the Junior Wimbledon final, and his sister is a scholar, and we were at an academy, and her name is Radina. I said, go watch those 3 lessons over there. Don't say anything. Then she came back, all 3 players have palm up. But the coach doesn't know. I mean, it's
right.
Vic used to say this as well. If you know your short ball range, you know tennis. So I would hear things like that, and then that's where I would take the club and hit people over the head. Did you hear him say that?
Yeah.
He said, if you know the short ball range, then you could call yourself a coach. And if you don't know it, but that's where there's just so many things that are golden nuggets. It's a treasure chest, and our game would be played better. I mean, I think instead of all this infighting and people out handing out business cards, merchant of flesh, it's just like, okay, everybody's trying to fight over the same 20 kids who can play instead of bringing new kids into the game. And, be able to teach. And I think that's another thing, too, is that we've already touched upon it, but Vic, he didn't have to be, certainly, he was excited to have someone like Tim Gullickson, and there's so many other people that would come in and ask for advice, but he was happy to help the ordinary Joe, just down to earth and level-headed and good-natured. But, Mackie D, SIB, smart Irish.
Steve-O, D-I-B, yeah.
Smart Irish boy. That's what the dumb Irish boy.
This has been great. I mean, we've done this a couple of times where we just go on a long.
A couple of times.
Yeah,
oh my word.
Yeah, talking about Vic. I mean, we could do it. Yeah, but anyway, anytime, guys.
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
No, all the best to Jackie, you and the family. Anything else, Flanagan?
Oh, I really appreciate it. Just your perspective, and thanks for taking the time. I know that everyone listening will really enjoy it. And like Steve said, the number one pillar is definitely Vic, and really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it myself personally, and thanks again.
Yeah, if you're going to build a house, you have to have a foundation, and I think also too Vic's and his curiosity. I know he stayed with brain typing. He just loved brain typing, but he would always be on the cutting edge. Is what's new? How can we do things better? But when it really comes back to just that, you have to circle back and be brilliant with basics.
Yep. All right. Well, it's a privilege for me, guys. I enjoyed it, and anytime.
All right, Mackie D. Adios, amigos.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
You guys. Yeah, take care.
Yeah, all right, we'll do it again.
Bye-bye.
All right, Flanagan, let's wrap this thing up here.
Sure. I think Vic Braden, the researcher, Vic Braden, the teacher, Vic Braden, the sports psychologist, the biomechanist, really a renaissance man, the athlete. Even the line you said about problems versus solutions. I think having our business here in South Florida, there's so much tennis being played here, and thinking about the comprehensive approach. We have this hitting, quote unquote, hitting lane. We have mental performance coach, nutrition, physical therapy, the whole, I think in our little way, hopefully we're kind of carrying on that comprehensive approach as well. But he just did it before anyone even thought to do it. And that's just an incredible thing. But I think one more takeaway is I didn't know your dad looked like Bob Hope.
Yeah, definitely.
Some of these kids with palm up serves, they got two kinds of hopes, Bob Hope and no hope.
Bob Hope and no hope. Bob Hope was born in England, and he left when he found out he couldn't be king. He's always looking for a war. Bob Hope. Blast from the past. So I've known McLaughlin 43 years. 43 years. He didn't know my father looked like Bob Hope. Mike, I would say this. He said, well, he hasn't really been in tennis for the last 20 years. It's so much to do with bringing up his third daughter with his wife Jackie, but once you know it, you know it.
Just rattles it off. It's amazing.
Yeah, no. So that's where it's again, it's not hero worship. I know Andy Fitzell says it so well. Just let me see your kids hit the ball. Mm-hmm. But it is unfortunate where people will embellish that they know, they knew Vic Braden or they knew the Vic Braden method, and all you have to do is listen to someone for a minute or two, and then Mm-hmm. So, and again, I can't say it enough over and over again. Just the facts, Jack. Make it make sense. We need truth in tennis teaching, and it is an art, it is a science, but we've gone way too far away from the science. It's that old line that you said you liked where I go, well, if that's how a snake goes down a hole, I say, okay, I'll believe you. But there's kids hitting forehands that have 92 different parts that they don't need to have. But no, Mike he's a great guy, and he's certainly a great guy to represent Vic. And he's someone we can definitely talk to again.
I think he said that well about, we brought up the legacy, professional players, recreational players. I think he said that really well. He's in the Hall of Fame, and that's great testament to what he did for the sport of tennis. I know that there's probably not a lot of people that think about their legacy, but those that are thinking that their best legacy left behind is what ranking that their players had in high school or college or the pros. If that's their definition of a great legacy, I think they should really reevaluate their.
I one time was talking to a dean. I worked for Richard Minner, and he said, "You're rocking the boat." This is in Tyler, Texas, where there's 88 Baptist churches. So he said, "You're rocking the boat." I said, "I'm not rocking the boat. I can't rock the boat. The boat's underwater." And I do think that tennis needs a knee-jerk reaction. People don't need to be politically correct. Tennis is in trouble. We need to do a much better job. Team together, everyone accomplishes more. Let's get on the same page. Let's at least get the Vic Braden book. So there is the Hall of Fame, and I think it's great that Vic is in the Hall of Fame. I think it's unfortunate that he wasn't inducted just like Dennis Vandermeer during his lifetime. But there's also the Hall of Shame. And all you have to do is go and watch, and you see these kids that are working hard, and the parents. It's getting totally out of whack on how expensive it is. And we need to come together. We'll sign off here, but I told a parent today, I said, I think parents should boycott. How much did you pay to play in this tournament? And, we don't run the type of academy where, you go to the academy, but then you have to take a lesson that costs, from the head coach, it costs several $100s per hour. And, Hall of Fame and Hall of Shame, it is a shame that we're back to square one because Vic was a myth buster. And the myths that he broke, we have a podcast on just myths alone that they're out there bigger than ever. But anyway, listeners, thanks for hanging in there. If you're on an international flight, this is a podcast to listen to.
Thanks, guys.
And Joe Rogan, that was not true. He's not working with us. But we aspire to have him.
We fired him, right?
No, we didn't even hire the guy. But with Joe Rogan, I think that sooner or later he's going to hear us. He's going to shut his operation down and come work for us.
Smart guy.
And Tom Brady, what a career, and Happy New Year, Chinese New Year. Thanks, Mike McLaughlin. Good night. Over and out. Flanagan, you did it again.